Hey guys, today we're back with Steve Adams finishing up part one, firearms expert, police, SWAT, and a quick message from our sponsor that's bringing you today's podcast, Bow Shield T9. They sent me a can last week. I used it on a couple boats I winterized, and come springtime, I'll have results for you. But thank you everybody at Bow Shield. Their products used in NASA, Boeing, all marine applications. They're everywhere. Go to their website. It is bowshield.com, and help them out. They help me out, and I appreciate it. But Steve-O, thanks for coming in today, buddy.
Thanks for having me again.
Beautiful rainy day.
It's awesome out.
So what's been going on since last time I talked to you? Anything good?
Still working hard, you know.
Yeah, how's the holidays?
Wonderful. Ate a lot.
Yeah.
There's something that just didn't agree.
Did you have more than 10 people at your house?
What?
Is it me, you, and COVID on this show?
What?
No, it's good, buddy. I'm glad you had a good holiday and all, man.
Yeah, man.
I'm missing my mom and dad are down in Florida for the holiday, and left me stranded.
Miss you, Papa. Mama.
But happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hope your holiday was great. And we're going to dive back into it here, man. In part one, we covered a lot that had to do with law enforcement and the general 1-2 on everything.
Yeah, I thought we basically saved the world.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
We definitely misread the election. What is what it is. But listen, man, I wanted to do part 2 with you because I feel that there was a major opportunity that we missed, which was to talk about more of the intricacies of law enforcement training and firearm safety and training. And that's something that I feel, especially right now, is important to most gun-owning Americans. I mean, what do we do with, going forward with, 2A in question, and how do we better protect ourselves in our homes?
Completely agree. And a lot of things we did discuss, we really expanded out a lot, kind of politically, and then got into some law enforcement things. And there's so many more details we could get into. Okay. There's so many more details we could get into as far as different types of tools that are available to law enforcement, kind of the enemies against them at this point in history, and then also get into civilians, because there's our huge civilian population that are pro 2A, and what's available to them, and thoughts on even down to the basics with guns. So that's all. There's so many more important things. We could do 10 parts. So.
Right. And I feel that most gun owners understand what it is that we're talking about. When I say gun safety, gun responsibility, I think that most people, there's a huge notion in the media that gun owners are incredibly unsafe, that kids wind up with guns, that's how we end up with school shootings and all these horrible things. Mm-hmm. But truthfully, I mean, I think that's the same notion that they apply to cops. One bad cop makes 10 bad cops.
That gets into agenda pushing, and there's obviously there's a massive push for gun safety and gun crime, and they're all agendas to remove guns from law-abiding citizens, whereas they're not removing guns from criminals, and they're not punishing criminals the way they should. So everything's twisted up, and we did get into some of those things last time. As far as individual gun safety, and this is for everybody, whether law enforcement, military, civilian, no matter what. When it comes down to you having a firearm or firearms, there's 4 simple rules that everybody really needs to know. They should memorize them, and that way they can practice with that firearm safely. It's the most basic stuff ever, and I certainly met a lot of police throughout my career who did not have them memorized. It's to me, it's that critical. As far as instruction goes, there's a crazy amount of instructors out there. people think they can watch YouTube and learn a lot of stuff. There's YouTube videos all over the place regarding guns and different things that might interest you if you want to learn. Some are really good and some are just not good.
Right.
But as far as when anyone comes across an instructor, like I'll look at myself and I'm a forever student. So no matter who or what I'm instructing, I go into it looking to learn. And every time I instruct, I learn. And that's the way it is. When I go back to like my first firearms instructor in the police academy, like man's man, Vietnam vet, and his big thing was, you'll learn how to shoot, but if anybody's going to shoot anybody around here, it's going to be me. As a kid in your young 20s, you're like, wow, okay. But like a few years later, when I was on the SWAT team and I'm with all these guys with huge egos, but yet the most humble guys. And I'm like, man, that police academy instructor was a dick. Like, that's not the way you should be. You should be making every student better than you.
Right.
And that's the ultimate goal. In a humble way, in a basic way, covering everything.
Isn't that funny how people in a position like that teaching usually are trying to teach you how much better they are than you?
And if you're with an instructor like that, go find another one.
Right.
That's not efficient instruction, in my opinion. These are
right.
This is me and the best instructors I met and who've instructed me are forever students and very humble. Yet they are incredibly, incredibly good, gifted, and some of them might not even be the best instructors, but you could still learn from them. And by not the best instructor, they may not have the most efficient way to communicate a way to do something or a way they do something like that. Because some instructors are incredibly skilled, yet they lack the communication skills to bring those skills to somebody else to be able to teach them how to do it.
Right.
Doesn't make them a bad person. It just, you got to recognize that there's something that could be done better to teach a person through communication.
Right.
So.
Well, and you see that a bit in life. I see it around the races. Mm-hmm. There's a few drivers that I seriously admire, and I feel that they're not the archetype. Like, I can't walk up and say, like, hey, man, how'd you do this or how'd you do that? They're not really that kind of person, but you can learn a lot through observation. So, like, like when you're at a range with an instructor that may not be the best teacher, mm-hmm. you can still watch and watch what he does and learn. Mm-hmm. You can learn from just about every one of those situations, And it's funny, I'm pretty accustomed to firearms. I've been around it for a long time. And even myself, like, there's times where I pick up a gun and I just don't even feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. Like it's just not what I'm used to, or I'm not sure how, certain slides work, or how certain clips are, like you pick up an old. We were just having a conversation before we came in about a 1911 I was playing with over the weekend, and that in particular, the clip, you had to just about Muay Thai knee it into the gun, mm-hmm. And I wasn't used to that. I thought I was gonna break it, and it's funny because it's just time. It's just the more time you spend with things, the more comfortable you are with things, and there is no limit on training. You can train forever.
Yeah.
It's super important.
It's incredibly important. Today things are a little more difficult to actually go out and shoot because everybody and their mother is buying all the ammunition in the world, and for whatever reason, but the price of ammunition is super high, and the scarcity it's just hard to find now. Right. So unless you've have a little bit of backup, and now you're gonna be skimping on that because you can't get any new stuff. Right. So basically what we have to do is stop buying ammo. You let the supply build up, so the prices will go down a little bit. But right. Nobody's going to do that right now. Things are too crazy.
No. Hey, one sec. Just try to center your mic up. Try that.
Mm-hmm. How's that?
What's your favorite round?
What's my favorite round?
What's your favorite round? What brings the boom the right way for you?
308.
308, my man. That fixed it, by the way. Thank you.
Okay.
I wanted to step back on something. Earlier, when we were talking about just gun safety and responsibility, you brought up a few things that you could easily offhand remember. Is there there's always an acronym or something for these things? Is there a name for it, an acronym for it, or is there just a few rules that you have in your head?
For the 4 rules, the
Yep.
4 safety rules, it's just they're so simple. It's just so easy to memorize.
Fire them off.
All guns are always loaded. It's that simple. All guns are always loaded. You can expand on it by saying treat all guns as always loaded. Doesn't matter if I've sat here and you've showed me a handgun and I know it's not loaded from me watching you. As soon as you hand it to me, you're going to hand it to me the right way, and I'm still going to check it. So all guns are always loaded.
Right.
Never put your finger on the trigger until your sights are on the target. Huge. The laser rule, or never cover your muzzle with anything you aren't willing to destroy. And then the last one is be sure of your target and what is around and beyond it. So those 4 things are the easiest things in the world to remember, yet too many people in law enforcement don't have those simple things memorized. And it only takes you not following one of them to make a big mistake.
Right.
So-
And it can be catastrophic.
Yes.
And I do believe that, I hope that by us doing these shows, we drive at least a couple people to at least go to a range. Just go spend, you don't need to go through the process of getting your firearms ID and the whole jumping through hoops. I don't know where you're watching from, but here in New Jersey, it's just about impossible. You can go to a range and rent a gun and shoot for a day with an instructor, and it's a good thing to understand because there is a realness about putting a firearm in your hand, and understanding what that is does 2 things to people. It either scares them or it drives them to be more like you, where you're very responsible with it because you understand the repercussions of what you're holding.
And no matter what the result, it's still an education, no matter what. Whether it scares you or whether you understand it and want to understand it more. Let's go back a year now, a lot of people who were anti-gun have been buying guns. And I'm not for that because they have this idea in their head that they're going to go buy a gun and they're going to be safe.
Right. Well, and just not to cut you off, but it's not the hypocrisy of it.
No.
It's literally not safe. Someone who detested it their whole life that suddenly feels unsafe and thinks that a firearm is going to change that, is going to change you from unsafe to safe, only made the situation even more unsafe.
Yes. What you're doing is you're basically buying guns for bad guys because you have to go through a lot of mental and physical preparation to understand that firearm that you're purchasing and respect it and use it as the tool it was meant to be. And to just buy a firearm believing that you're going to be safe is just completely the wrong thing to do.
It's asinine.
Yes.
And I think what you're going to see, and just a prediction of mine, is exactly what everybody is afraid of. You wind up with this situation where a lot of these guns that were purchased in the last 7-8 months are going to wind up in pawn shops once people realize that this COVID thing isn't going to create the apocalypse, and that's where you see these criminals getting their hands on these guns is after it's the second hand of legal gun owners.
Yep.
And that's why we need to push the responsible gun owner on the country, because
Always.
The problem with them taking those guns away is people like to attribute it to things that don't sound so dramatic. Well, I target shoot, it's just a hobby of mine, I'm a collector, right? The truth of the matter is a gun cannot hurt your situation. Mm-hmm. Only you can hurt your situation.
Absolutely.
Guns don't kill people, people do. All those things that you see on the posters, they're all 100% true.
Yeah, but that's anti-agenda.
Exactly. And that's a problem. I don't want to speculate as to what the agenda is, but clearly the agenda is to disarm America. And whether
law-abiding America.
Exactly, which is so silly. I get that maybe we're being a bit dramatic about that as well. Maybe they just want to see some better background checks, some better, that I can almost get with that. Mm-hmm. But the thought of the police one day coming around to collect guns on a mandatory buyback is a very, very scary thought. And America needs to wise up because we are attributing to the problem through irresponsible gun ownership. I mean, gun owners that understand it, respect it, and follow, like your 4 simple rules there. You don't have to follow them maybe exactly as Steve-O said it, but if you're pretty damn close to that, you're going to live a long, successful life with your firearm. You're not going to, shoot yourself in the shower or something.
Absolutely. You can put a play on words on that, and there's certainly plays on words. It's been around for so long that there's different ways. I repeated them the way I memorized them and the way I practiced them. And, like any little play on word can still mean the same thing in the end. And as long as you memorize it your way, because you're not changing anything, you're just changing a word here or there maybe, but it's still the same result. And you practice that, you're going to be a safe and successful firearms owner.
Right. And one that you said that stuck immediately is don't put your finger on the trigger till the sights are on the target. That is so important. I see people all the time. They pick up a gun, and 90% of them do this. They pick up the gun and they slide their finger right in on top of the trigger, right. And then they go, and they take it off. You got to just get that in your head. Don't touch that trigger. You don't want the gun to go off. You're just looking at it.
And they skip the first rule that all guns are always loaded, because the very first thing they should be doing is checking to make sure that gun is clear.
Right.
And then they can pick it up and hold the grip, whatever. Don't put your finger on the trigger. So it's almost like there's an order, but there's not, but there is an order.
Right.
So don't skip any of them. Practice it always. And when you memorize it, you just practice it.
But to me, that one is just like, that's like telling don't aim guns at people.
Yeah.
How many people do you see pick up a gun? They go like this, right at their best friend. Look how cool this thing is. It's not going to be cool when he loses his shoulder.
And that's how kids shoot kids, their friends, their brothers,
right.
or sisters, because the parents are irresponsible, and a kid gets a gun and does that. It's like an animal instinct. We're animals, and that's what they do.
Right.
And that's, oh my God.
That's horrible.
Tragic. Yeah.
It's horrible. But so I'm going to shoot a couple rookie questions at you, because I honestly don't know, and I think people would like to know. Mm-hmm. When we talk about the training side of firearms, what is it that you practice at the range when you're, whether you were at any point in your career, whether it would have been in the police department or SWAT, or what are a couple key things that you practiced every time you went to the range?
Always the 4 safety rules. So that covers everything that you're going to end up doing at the range. You're going to do it safely. Pointing the weapon in a safe direction. Now that doesn't mean always not downrange, because there's a lot of instructors or range rules that'll say you have to always keep your firearm downrange. Well, you can expand on it a little bit and say always keep your firearm directed in a safe way, or in a safe direction. That may not be downrange, but it's not at someone, or in an unsafe direction. So there we go with like a play on words. But if you're at a range and it says always keep your weapon pointed downrange, you have to follow those rules.
Right.
So there's some safety rules that you do. As far as beyond that, always the basics. If I'm doing some target practice with a handgun, and I have a handgun and holster and mag pouches, I'm always doing the same thing, the same basic over and over. When I'm drawing from the holster out to one target, firing, I draw one particular way. It's the quickest way from point A to point B, and I go from the target back to my holster the same exact way. Those are practices that will get you more efficient and more basic. When I'm doing my reloads, there's so many different ways to reload now that people are teaching, and I go back to the most basic way that I learned, the way your mag pouches are. Now, I've seen, oh my God, some crazy things with police and how they carry their extra magazines. A lot of police, you will see the magazine pouches like horizontal versus vertical. So we always carried them vertical with the bullets down and
right.
facing toward the center of us, because then when you reload, it was the most efficient way. If you look at IPSC and competition shooters, that's how they carry their spare magazines. It's the most efficient, the fastest way to reload. And life is a competition. If your life is on the line, it comes down to split seconds. So if you can reload faster, that's one thing that you need to do. When cops carry their mag pouches horizontally, basically it's because some fat instructor down the line switched from vertical to horizontal because his fat belly was uncomfortable with the vertical mags poking his belly. So he switched them to horizontal. And then we get into parrot instruction. Well, this is what I taught, so this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to teach. And not everything is right. And that's coming from a guy who was in the same hole. Like, I've taught things that were not good. It's like I look back and I'm like, that's not good. But I was in the forest of like police instruction, and these are things we had to teach. And now when I got out, I'm retired, I look back and I'm like, that's not a good thing right now. You shouldn't be teaching that.
Right.
So there's you just keep on going on and on. There's so many different things that could be changed for the better. Like when I first got into policing, the requirements for New Jersey, we were shooting from the 50-yard line. Well, when I got on, the 50-yard line was taken away, and everybody was moved up to the 25-yard line, and then because the 50 was too far, because they saw that all the encounters were closer than 50 yards. So let's move everything in. Well, they moved it in so far that the weapon retention shooting is so close an arm's length away of a paper target that's too close to teach an officer to go to his handgun.
Now, let me ask you a question before you go any further than that. I have a couple of friends in the state police that have taught me about the 21-foot rule. Mm-hmm. Is that something you're familiar with or that you practiced?
We practice it. That's the 21-foot rule is if a person has a knife and they're 21 feet or closer, then they can kill you. They can get to you.
You're hand to hand at that point.
Absolutely, that point.
Or tool belt to hand.
Absolutely.
But do not draw your firearm, because it's been proven that in that 21 feet, on the average human being, they can get to you before you can draw and fire accurately.
Yes.
Now, why would it be that when you're in the academy or when you're training or you're shooting at targets closer than 21 feet?
In a lot of cases, it's all this was made up by administrators, and let's say whoever makes up these courses, they have to make a qualification course. So let's go and make these courses. So 21 feet would be 7 yards. There's certainly requirements for the New Jersey handgun qualification course that are 7 yards, 5 yards, and the weapon retention, which is an arm's length.
Right.
So, and you're shooting at paper targets. That's where you have to start thinking and being like, this is dangerous. Most cops who get shot or killed within that arm's length, I'll just stick with weapon retention shooting, within that arm's length, have it ingrained in their head that if they get into a fight with somebody, with a bad guy, then they can pull their gun and shoot this person within an arm's reach and be successful and survive. Well, that's crap. They're shooting a paper target.
Right.
If they actually, and there's guys who teach this who are very, very good at it, who teach it with real people, and you can use simunitions or any type of marking ammunition where I draw on you and it's my job to shoot you, and you're a real person, but you're a real person who fights back. And the first time I go for my gun, and as soon as I bring it out of the holster, you're going to go for my gun. And then the real fight's on for the gun. Because if you're better than me and you get my gun, you're going to shoot me. And that, from the holster to the target, is where most guns are taken away. It's not in the holster or on target. So cops are successful when they're on target or in the holster. That in-between time is very dangerous. And weapon retention teaching, weapon retention shooting teaching in paper targets is very dangerous. Right.
I have two, and you're 100% right. I have two friends that died 6 or 7 years ago. It was their gun. The guy took it away and shot both of them. So you're 100% right. There's that aspect of you think you're safe because it's there, but it can be taken away from you.
Right.
You know.
And if you're being mentally prepared when you're trained.
Right.
You know, you're physically going through things. You're gaining muscle memory because you're repeating it again and again and again.
Right.
But you're actually believing that because I shoot this paper target an arm's length away, I'm going to survive.
Right.
And that's really false.
Right.
Because when you're actually up against fighting a person, it's already happened over and over and over again that's not the way the real world works. So there needs to be another evolution in training, especially police, where they're taking these things into consideration, where shooting a paper target at an arm's length away is not a good thing.
Right.
And I certainly don't train people that way. There's a few other instructors out there who are really, really good at it, and they practice real training,
right.
not bullshit.
It sounds to me like golfers would make good shooters. Because there was something that you said in the beginning there that every time you go to the range, you remove your gun from the holster to the target and back to the holster the same exact way. Now, I played golf for a lot of years, and it's going to sound like a stretch, but every single time you walk up to the ball, you have to swing, stand, everything the same way, or else you'll never recognize a variation in your result. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If you vary in the way you handle it, then you won't ever understand why the result varied.
That's the truth.
And it's funny because it literally becomes like right now, right? I could walk up to a golf ball and probably 6 out of 10 times hit it pretty well. Right. And I haven't played in years because I practice so much. I practice so well. Every single time I went, I took it very seriously. My father and my brother are very good. They play all the time, and when I was younger, I wanted to play with them. Mm-hmm. And so I took it very seriously. It was a lot of muscle memory, a lot of, really every time you do it, take it seriously. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because listening to you talk about, shooting at the range or practicing, it sounds just like that. Yep. It sounds like every single time you go. How about this? Every single one of my buddies that I see post pictures at a range, in a pit, in the woods, somewhere, right? There is never a picture where the gun is not next to the beer.
Oh, Jesus.
Right? That's what you see. You see these guys out in the woods, they're shooting at trees, and they're trying out their new gun, and they're drinking a six-pack with their buddy. Not being serious whatsoever. Yeah. I mean, no thought process goes into that. Mm-hmm. There's no... When I was shooting with you, this was probably about 10 years ago now. One thing I noticed that you did is you never completely loaded the clip. Mm-hmm. And I was laughing. I was watching you do it. Magazine, sorry. But I used to laugh because I sit there and I watch, like I'll go through 25, 30 bullets in 10 minutes, whereas you're on like your 5th one. And if you walk up, there's one hole, and it's like, fuck, you put all 5 of them in there. It's like, it's funny because just little things like that I hear you say, you can really apply to just normal everyday stuff. You don't have to be a SWAT officer or, you can really benefit from regimented training.
Absolutely. Like you touched on the magazine loading. One thing that we learned, we never fully loaded the magazine, any magazine to capacity. We always left one out. And that's because when you're loading a magazine on a closed bolt or just a closed chamber, sometimes there are some magazines out there that are so tight when they're loaded to full capacity that it creates a difficulty in loading that magazine.
Right.
So, and you may think you have it locked in place, but it's not, and it'll fall out.
Right.
So these are little things. Leave a round out, and you'll always load it in there with no problem because there's play when that magazine seats. There's a little bit of play in there that if there's a bolt blocking it, that it's got to push that round down just a hair. That play is there, and you're never going to have a problem.
And something that's in my head as you explain that is most people. And I don't want to generalize, but most people that I talk to, or they've never taken their gun apart. Mm. They do the simple stuff to clean it, mm-hmm. but they've never really taken apart and looked at how it works.
Right.
They follow the YouTube video of, you clean the pin, the barrel, they whatever it is, whatever kind of gun they have, whatever they do. How important is it, do you think, to understand the mechanics of your gun? I mean, if you were in a real-time situation and you had an issue like you're talking about now, that could have easily been prevented.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna back it up. So in the simplest terms, when any one of us picks a gun, it should be what works for us. So, and that's coming from a guy in the Glock hole. And I was forcibly put in the Glock hole because that's what we started with, and that's what I used throughout my career, and I use to this day, because once you start using something for so long, and as efficient as we became with that, as I became with that handgun, I'm in a Glock hole. So all I want is a Glock, and that's that. When I'm instructing, so we need a gun for Boomer, I take you to the firearms store. I want a full frame handgun for you, so I pick whatever caliber you want. I lay out a whole bunch of guns in that caliber, and you pick up each one and feel it and work the slide. Whichever one feels the best for you is going to be your best gun. When I took my wife to get a handgun, a semi-automatic handgun, we did that exact process, and she ended up picking the Smith & Wesson SD9. Me personally, I would have never picked that, never in a million years, but that worked best for her when she's trying out all the guns. So that's the simplest way, and then you become much better with that gun because you're comfortable with it. And it's with shooting positions. Anything you're comfortable with, you'll be better because you're comfortable. If you're uncomfortable, I see a lot of people when they're shooting will bring their eyes to their sights. Like they'll hold the gun on the target low and then squat down and shoulders up and bring their head down to the sights, and that's not what you do. You
Right.
always bring your sights to your eyes, not the other way around. So all these basic things will lead you to be a safer and more efficient shooter.
And something that maybe some people would be wondering right about now is how important is it shooting with two eyes open versus one?
Well, when you shoot with two eyes open, which a lot of people don't teach, you can still see everything. And you don't need to close an eye down unless you're really getting into precision shooting. But when we're doing handguns, we're not doing precision shooting or anything like that. You want to see everything. And we're all eye dominant. One of our eyes is dominant over the other. You're right-handed, you're most likely right eye dominant. I've taught a lot of right-handed shooters who are left-hand dominant, and there are some funky things that people would teach to help them shoot better. But the best thing to do would be just you take the handgun and you cant it over a little bit. So now my sights are lined up with my left eye.
Right.
And you shoot. And just that one little simple thing fixed all their accuracy problems.
Right. See, I had been taught to silhouette shoot, like shoot with both eyes open and focus on your sights and put them on the target. Like
Front sight.
Right. And then I found that, like, as time went on, I would move away from that, go back to that. Depends on if it was fresh in my head or not. And then as time went on, I really saw a difference. Like if I was shooting with both eyes open, my head's clear, I'm just firing away, I fire really well. Mm-hmm. If I'm not thinking, I'm not, pushing on mechanics and technique, and I got one eye closed and I'm shooting for a propane tank 45 yards away, I miss 90% of the time. So to me, it seems like however you started training, you should, unless you're in bad training habits, but however you started, you should really practice consistency on that.
Absolutely. Tex Grebner became famous for shooting himself on a YouTube video. It's on YouTube, look it up, and put the nail in the coffin for the Serpa holster. So I've used the Serpa holster since 2006 when they basically first came out. I swear by it. They are inexpensive. There's better holsters out there, but for me to change now would be counterproductive. So I'll stick with it, but I'll recommend the better holsters to new people.
Right.
And looking back at Tex Grebner, what he did earlier that day, he was shooting a different gun with a different holster. And then he gets on the video with this now different gun and the Serpa holster and ends up shooting himself.
Right.
So when you change equipment and whether it's your gear, your holster, your handgun, when you do that, you're risking failure. And he failed in one of the worst ways. When you shoot yourself, that's a pretty big failure.
Right.
Okay, so a lot of people will blame equipment versus the actual person who did it. And that's throughout society. Let's blame something else for our own stupidity.
Because he cheddar bobbed himself.
Yeah. Like, just don't be stupid to begin with.
Right.
You find gear, and there's real good quality gear out there that's safe and durable. And anything, you put something to test, you're going to break anything.
Right.
So don't be like, watch a YouTube video and you see whoever like destroying something.
Oh, dude, that's like those videos when these guys put these screen protectors on their phone and hit them with a hammer.
Yeah, I mean,
and then they break their phone and they're looking at the camera like, oh no.
Yeah, like we can break anything. Yeah. Okay, but to use something that is high quality and the safest it could be out there and use it and become comfortable with it, and know the limitations of what can break it and what can create a malfunction will serve you better in the long run than just taking sledgehammers to shit.
Right.
So,
and it's funny because when you say failed in the worst possible way, shot himself, I would wager that most people would think to themselves, I would never shoot myself. Listen. It happens way more commonly than people think. Yeah. Okay, I'm a huge New York Giants fan. Not at the moment. I'm a little unhappy with the NFL. But in 2007, when they won the Super Bowl, their starting wide receiver was Plexico Burress. He's in a nightclub in New York City in a pair of sweatpants and a revolver in his drawstring. And because he's a $20 million man out in New York City at night, I understand. I get it. Should have hired a bodyguard. It wasn't registered. He did time in prison for it. But he pulled the gun out of his drawstring because it was falling down and shot himself in the leg. It happens. It happens every day, and people don't realize how easy it is. And every gun's safety is different. Every gun's trigger is different. You really got to find something you like that holster that you mentioned there. Well, I'll include it in the podcast for people to see what you use. And invest in something that will prolong your life. Yeah. Don't shoot your leg off and lose your career like Plexico Burress.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to the 4 safety rules.
Right.
And then just beyond that, a little bit of common sense. Okay. Right. Carrying around a loaded handgun in a stupid way is going to give you stupid results. And that's just the way it is. Nobody who shot themselves has gone out and said, I'm going to shoot myself today, other than the founder of Second Chance Body Armor, who there's videos of him shooting himself all the time in his own body armor that he invented. Which
is awesome, by the way.
That was the way he marketed it.
Right.
So that's a little different. But
that's like the guy that built the bulletproof rolls and sat in the driver's seat while they shot AK-47s at him.
Yeah.
That's that's believing in your product there.
That is absolute, the best marketing that you could have, because for sure that what you're putting out there is the best product, because you're saving your own life. But in general, nobody is going to go say, hey, I'm going to shoot myself today. That just doesn't work.
Right. And it's seriously important too. I mean, it's when we were talking about the repetition, right? There's something that I notice a lot of high level shooters do, and they all do it different. But it's also the repetition. The repetition made me think of this. The rhythm in which you're actually firing, right? You see some people shooting 2s, some people shooting 3s. Is that something that you guys practice at the range to tighten your group? Is it something you do to conserve ammunition? Or is it something that you do to remember where you're at in your magazine?
Typically, if you're, like you say, shooting 2s, double tap, shooting 3s, we learned When the Israelis came and started teaching us, we learned from them that they would shoot three because you could shoot three effectively without the gun moving from the target.
Right.
Now, with a lot of practice, you can shoot a lot more than three.
Right.
Okay. But in stressful situations, things are different. Like target shooting is so much different than stressful shooting, because you can't replicate effectively the most efficient way the levels of stress you are going to experience when your life is on the line.
Right.
Like you can do competitions, you can get your heart rate way up, you can do things to increase your stress level and make it more difficult for you to be an efficient shooter. And that's good practice, but you're not going to approach what's going to happen when the shit hits the fan and your life's on the line, because you don't know how you're going to react until that situation actually happens. So when you're doing double taps or shoot three or aiming for the head, that becomes like the twos and threes are like a backup plan. Like,
right.
I know I can hit the target from this many yards away from it, shooting three quick rounds, and they're going to hit the target.
Right.
Because I've practiced it over and over and over and over again. So that's what you're doing. I'm not going to shoot 4 rounds because I might miss. And that's a problem that police have to answer for later. But when it comes to actual shootings, when their life is on the line, like years ago, there was the Empire State Building shooter who ended up going to the Empire State Building. I believe he had a shotgun, shot his old boss or whatever.
The guy in the trench coat.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then left. And as he's going away, people are freaking out. They're telling the cops he's over here, he's over there, he's this, that, the other thing. 2 cops end up finding him. They get in the shootout, and nine civilians were hit by police rounds.
Really?
During that.
Not
gunfight.
shotgun pellets, actually.
No,
Police rounds.
Police rounds.
Wow.
So again, now I get back to your life is on the line, and look at the results. What happens? You're not thinking double taps or 3 shoot. You're like, I'm emptying this magazine.
Well, and it is Manhattan. I mean, that's probably something like shooting fish in a barrel.
Pretty much. There was a lot of people there. They're not thinking about
hit the ground, man.
Their target, what's around it, what's beyond it. They're
Right.
just shooting.
Right.
And that falls back on poor training, because they weren't trained for situations like that, where they're involved in a stressful environment.
Right.
So there's so much you can learn from each incident that happens.
Right.
And that's really, if you have a good instructor staff, they'll be putting things like that together for you and teach you those things.
Right. And something that you keep referring to is stress level. And there was a particular time where you showed up here. It was the day after Dave Rabb had passed away in Point Pleasant. And you were kind of giving me a rundown on what it was that I exactly experienced that day as far as what stress did to my consciousness, right? Now, I don't want to paraphrase or put words in your mouth. You can explain a little bit of what you taught me there. But how important is that to people to understand, at least at a minimal level, going through life?
I guess like the best way, like you were unprepared for such a situation like that. Like you've never been trained for it. It was obviously a life and death situation. And when you're not trained for that, there's things your body goes through. You revert back to those animal instincts that we are. We're animals, and I always repeat that. So when you are subjected to incredible stresses, you remember some things and you don't remember some things. Tunnel vision is the most frequent thing that people talk about. Your vision will close in on whatever the subject is. You'll experience auditory exclusion, which means you just can't hear certain things. These are well-documented things that happen to us, all of us, when we're confronted with a situation that is outside our scope of knowledge, training, whatever, and it's what happens. So when you tell me things that happen to you, And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. And it's neat when you learn about it. It's scary when you experience it.
Well, what was profound for me was when I had said to you that in what was documented as a minute's time passed, I had thought that was somewhere around 7 or 8 minutes. Mm-hmm. If you had to ask me to put a timestamp on it, I would have easily guessed upwards, around 10 minutes, and it was 1 minute.
Yeah. And
you had said to me that that's part of it. Right. Your brain can't process what's happening at the moment.
Time slows down incredibly, and that goes to our animal survival instinct, where like details are crazy, like because time slows so much, and anybody who's been in a car crash can understand that, because when you're in a car crash, you can explain things what happened, because that car crash that took fractions of a second, like all this, when you're in it, it slows down.
Right.
And it's just a crazy thing that our mind can do, and it only happens when you're stressed to the max.
Right.
So,
it's really important in life, and I do feel better from having that minimal amount of education from you as far as what goes on day to day. Like I guess I always understood stress, and I always understood, somewhat of its effects like long term, but there's nobody educating on how that happens in the moment, And it was funny because, as you said, details seemed to really come to light. One detail that was extremely, in right out in the open for me was the just complete helplessness. Mm-hmm. And I look at situations like I just because it was recent and in my head, I saw a documentary on the Vegas shooter mm-hmm. that shot everybody at that concert, mm-hmm. Allegedly. I think the people all kind of had the same story coming out of that concert, that, they heard the shots, they saw some people fall down, but they just had no idea what to do. And that's exactly how I felt. And that in and of itself becomes so overpowering. I mean, it takes over all of your mechanical function.
Right.
It becomes all you can think about, all you can focus on is that there's absolutely nothing I can do, mm-hmm. when there's a whole list of things you could do.
Right.
And the first thing is get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah.
And I think that people would benefit from a little bit of education there.
Extremely benefit. And the very first thing that occurs is a disconnect. And even today, with the agenda that's being pushed with active shooters and we have to curb this gun violence, this, that, the other thing. Like, it's happened so much that there's still a disconnect with people when it actually happens. They're like, when I'm teaching active shooter classes, the first thing I'll tell people, or one of the important things I tell them, like when I'm teaching businesses, like I'll go to different businesses and teach them what to do, how to prepare. And in the news, when you see people being interviewed, they're like, well, I thought it was firecrackers. Well, okay, in a business, how many times have you been in work sitting in your stall, at your desk, whatever, and somebody just lit off a bunch of firecrackers? Like, get that out of your head. People aren't going to work lighting off firecrackers.
Right.
Unless you work in a firecracker factory or whatever. Right. So if you hear something that sounds like firecrackers, you need to start thinking, okay, something dangerous is happening right now.
Right.
And that's just one simple thing. It becomes so much more complex in planning on what you should do. There's less good instruction for active shooters and way more bad instruction. There's agencies that'll go out and they'll do. I hope they're not still doing it, but probably still. There's some that will do unannounced shooters with blanks, where they go into a school and shoot blanks, and that's like completely traumatizing.
That's
kids.
Horrible.
Like,
yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like, how could you ever think of doing that? That you're just destroying kids. Like, it needs to be a lecture. You need to explain things to people and have them understand. And even once you go through all that, you're still not going to go into a school and shoot blanks with kids around.
Right. When I was in high school, we had all of the surrounding police departments one day come in, and they did something really cool. They brought in all their canine units, and they started out as an assembly in the auditorium, but it graduated to the police were roaming around the hallways, kind of letting them sniff the lockers and stuff like that. Now, that was probably traumatizing for anybody who had a bag of weed in their gym locker, but it was kind of cool at the same time to see how it operates, how it works, how the whole machine works. It was interesting, and there was a lot of really cool talking points that they had. Now, this is pre, school shooter and all the craziness. So it was a much more, just kind of more of a recruitment drive for the police department than anything else. But it was just super cool, and I thoroughly enjoyed that versus like the scenario you're depicting there, where they come into school firing blanks. I mean, I know kids that if you went like this in the hallway would piss themselves, let alone if a gun went off in a classroom. Right.
It's just, that's complete insanity, and the fact that any agency out there would ever think that's valuable training is the last thing anyone should ever consider, because it's completely damaging. You're not teaching people anything, and you have just taught a lot of people that they're just going to curl up into a ball if they ever experience that again. Right. And that's the last thing you've got to do.
Right. And it's funny. I obviously am a huge fight fan. There was a guy talking, like an analyst on ESPN about the recent Mike Tyson Roy Jones Jr. fight, which for anybody that watched, man, congratulations, you got to see a legend go one more time. But they were talking, the guy said, how do you go about scouting new talent? There's a lot of new talent on that undercard. And he said that I like to find guys that haven't had their ass kicked yet. And he said because there's a realization from being knocked out, and that in boxing in particular, this may not transfer into mixed martial arts. There's a lot more mixed martial arts fans than there's boxing fans anymore. I just wanted to say that. But when you get knocked out in boxing with those big gloves on and all the preparation that goes into that fight, if you've ever seen a professional level boxing camp, the shape that those guys are in when they walk in the ring is unbelievable. And Tyson's on record a lot talking about he walks in feeling like a god, Now, that is something that you cultivate in a fighter, right? You want to bring that to the forefront. You want that confidence. You want, when you hear Mike Tyson say, I'm just ferocious, I want to eat your heart, I want to eat your children, he means that. Right. Because he's been built to be that person. Right. If Mike Tyson would have walked into that first fight and got knocked unconscious, he would have learned a valuable lesson. But he wouldn't have had that killer instinct, And I think that that's the same type of thought process where when you walk into a high school and you start firing off blank rounds, there's going to be 30% of those kids or more that just curl up in a ball, go under their desk, whatever the stupid drill that they run in the school is. Oh, active shooter, everybody hide under their desk. Yeah. Why are you teaching kids to do that? Yeah. I don't think the kids should be storming the hallway, but you don't teach them to curl up into a ball and become target practice. Right. And I think that what you just depicted there is you're now not only teaching them to do that, but now that kid is going to live with that. Right. If a gun goes off in the hallway and he dives under the desk and hides, what's he going to think if he's home with his mom and Pops is out of town? And what if somebody came in my house with a gun? What, are you going to dive under your bed and crawl up in a ball?
Exactly.
It's silly.
Exactly. And through teaching active shooters what they're about and what you can do, prevention is by far the most effective method and the easiest to do, but there's political climates that literally prevent that. And understanding when that person enters the room you're in, hiding under a desk is the last thing that you may ever do in your life, because you've just made the best target in the world. Understand active shooters, now generalizing, the vast majority are undertrained, but they put a lot of effort in planning. So they have this incredible plan with very, very minimal training. Right. So they're going to experience. They're going for easy targets. So if they encounter minimal resistance, that changes their plan. And the whole thing that we need to do is change people's plans. And it doesn't matter if it's an active shooter, if it's a bad guy going against a cop, you need to change their plan in order to get in their head and do something. That might be a fraction of a second.
Right.
But if you don't understand these things, you don't train to do these things, you're never going to succeed.
I hate doing this on the show because I like for people to be able to look up what I'm talking about. But there was a video I had seen of it was around the last school shooting around that time, and I believe it was in was it California? I can't remember the state, but the guy was it means nothing. It's not important to what I'm saying. The guy was talking about how he was a firearms expert, probably much like yourself, ran some courses and some classes and stuff. He started coming into schools, rather than advising them on how to handle an active shooter, he was walking into that school as an active shooter and would educate them on, if I was going to do it, this is how I would do it. These are areas that you need to shore up. You need to have somebody over here. You need to, and I think that the preventative thought process is so much better than the reaction.
It's the only way, really, because let's take the percentage of active shooters right now, which has kind of oddly died off since COVID's been around. But we've had a couple, but nothing like normal.
Right.
Normal. But like that's my first step with teaching businesses and whoever I've taught. Is I do a safety evaluation, and I go over their entire structure, and I show them where their weak points is, what they can do, how they can make it safer. And then the next step is dealing with the individuals, whether it's in a school setting or in a business. They need to have proactive ways of helping people and creating avenues where people can communicate without fear of repercussions or punishments or negative discipline, things like that. That all falls in line with prevention and preparation. And when there's bad kids, they need to be punished. It's not like what went on in Parkland, where this kid was a bad kid, and multiple opportunities to discipline this kid,
were missed,
to try and work and help this child to be a better person, were completely ignored through the system that was set up. And that's not the way. We're like a society without consequences. And the only thing that happens when you don't have a consequence for a negative action is more negativity. So people need to wake up. In making a utopia, you got to have consequences for bad people. And it seems like all the consequences are on the law-abiding people versus the bad people.
Right.
So,
and a little bit of what you were talking about there, as far as surveying structures and stuff like that. People may not either remember from the first show or maybe new listeners. You work with churches now, with Chris. I'm sorry, Jimmy. Jim Paul. Sorry, I had three names in my head.
Rich Allison, Watchers and Warriors. We're a church group who goes to other churches and literally teaches the churches how to deal with active shooters for free.
Right. Now, 1 second there, because this is important to me, and I think it would resonate with a lot of people. When you were talking about earlier taking preventative measures, and there's a whole political landscape that stops you from doing that as far as active shooters and all this stuff, the notion that they push is that, why would we want to put this in our kids' head? Why would we want to have a cop at the front door with an AR-15? Or why would I want to have armed guards on school property? Well, if a church can bring in an assassin like yourself and have, hey, teach us, how do we not get lit up? Mm-hmm. Why can't you do that in schools? Why can't you have real plans, real education? I don't agree with the sugarcoating that goes on today. Mm-hmm. It's, at the end of the day, when you say bad people, that is such an understated. There are people in this world that are absolute monsters, monsters. People that would shake up a SEAL team member. So, I mean, the shit that these poor police officers have to walk in and find and investigate, and you need to know what to do with those people. You know what I mean? There is nothing wrong in this new soft-served world where there's nothing wrong with saying this person is a problem and it needs to be corrected. They need to understand what's the problem, you know, and we need to understand how to move forward with this problem. People nowadays are just content with pretending that problem doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
it's like living in fantasy land where people need to realize that the only way to stop a monster is to have monsters ready to stop them.
Right.
And a monster can be someone like me who is completely controlled but yet trained and capable of extreme violence. And I know there's a bunch of people like that. But when you look at a police department, more need to be that way versus the social worker thing that's going on right now. Because when the social worker, police officer, experiences real violence, they lose because they're not physically trained, they're not mentally trained, and there's huge problems.
Right.
So when you have a group of guys who goes out and trains as much as they possibly can to face those monsters, maybe they'll never face them, which would be a great thing. But if they do face them, they're going to be as prepared as they can be. You know, we all have a bad day. You could be unlucky, but you've done everything possible in your life to survive for yourself, your family, your friends, and your agency. Like when specifically to a police officer, when a police officer's killed, murdered, what have you, there's ripple effects. You know, there's times where it's turned into something maybe a little more glamorous, like died in the line of duty, they were serving, this, that, the other thing, and less impact, aside from the groups that support widows of officers and children of officers who've been murdered. Aside from those groups, the family, those ripples who are affected by that murder, death, what have you, go on forever. And if you're untrained and you were killed and you could have trained and made yourself better and possibly prevent that, I mean, geez, why wouldn't you do that?
Well, and also, I do believe that it's completely necessary, but could you imagine if they put the same amount of time in dissecting the chain of events that led up to that tragedy, if they put the same amount of effort into that as they did the service, the funeral service, the motorcycles, could you imagine if people looked at things objectively and said, how do we prevent this from happening again? Mm-hmm. We got to get, all these people together and this parade together and this together, and which I think is beautiful and they should continue doing.
Right.
But pay attention to what was important, what led up to him being in a box.
Yeah.
And what could have been prevented, what could have been changed. And the moral of the story is you're never going to fix everything. There's always going to be, something crazy that
like I
pops
said,
up.
you're going to like the best trained guy could have the worst day in the world. Like you go all the way back to the Miami shootout with the FBI. The most trained guy had eyeglasses, and the most trained with firearms. He lost his eyeglasses.
Right.
So, like, he didn't even have a strap to hold his eyeglasses on, which could have saved a lot.
Right.
But that one simple thing.
You look at guys that played like basketball, like Amari Stoudemire, one of my favorite players, played for the New York Knicks, played with a giant pair of goggles because he needed glasses. If you're a fucking police officer and you're going out in the line of duty, have your glasses secured to your head.
Like, I need glasses.
Right.
So if I'm going to if I'm doing something where my glasses could be broken or be lost or could cause things to go into shit, I'm gonna make the extra effort to make sure my glasses aren't going to do that.
Right.
For my SWAT jobs, I had a completely different pair of glasses that were basically glued to my head.
Right.
So these are just simple things you got to think of and understand your weaknesses. So if you can cover your weaknesses and train for the 95% of what's out there, because you always have to account for your bad day, or you're unlucky, or somebody's just better than you. There's really not much more you can do than that.
Right. Now, something that's a little bit off of the topic that I was curious about after our last show. I wanted to ask you about placing guns in the home. I laughed. There's a lot of like hilarious, comedy sketches or whatever. Like Bill Burr talks about, you're allowed to have a gun, but his wife's reading that you got to keep the stock over here and the barrel over there and the clip up here so that the kids can't put it together. And he's like, what am I going to do when the bad guy comes in? Run around the house and assemble this thing while he's chasing me?
Right.
And I laugh, but that is really, really important, and is there I think that the average gun owner, like myself, right? Let's just say I bought a gun and I walked into a house and I said, okay, I want to put it where I'm more than likely going to be, right? So like I would put one in my bedroom. Let's say I bought two. Maybe I'd put one in the kitchen, right? Now, how do you break that down? Like if you're really buying a gun for your protection, your home protection, that's what I think most people buy a gun for.
Right.
What are the steps that you take to securing your home? Where is there a like in my head, I would think that there would be, maybe your bedroom isn't the safest place in the house to be. Maybe there's a safer place. Maybe there's a place with more vantage points and escape. Do you place your guns there? Do you keep your guns where you can get your hands on them and go? Where exactly do you want to lay them out?
So that's like a multi-layer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thing.
But is there maybe a couple of?
Let me go back to the whole idea of having a gun in the house and taking it apart and put it in different places in the house. Okay, with kids. So first things first, if you have a gun or guns in the house and there's kids in the house, you need to educate the kids about the gun, flat out. Like, don't even skip it, because the kids know everything. And I will go back to something I'll never forget. There's things that happen in our lives that we never forget. I go back to being in ninth grade, and a kid committed suicide with his father's gun that was taken apart and all over the house. The kid knew where every single part was, and he killed himself. So, like, don't do that. Okay, there's safes all over the place. Like, you can get the right safe. Make sure if you're using one of the fingerprint safes that it works and it's in a good place. Being in the right place, you can never plan for. I'll go back to one of the SWAT jobs. An inexperienced guy went on a SWAT job. The leader put him, I think it was third or fourth in the line. So he was like basically in the house first, because in the planning, they didn't plan. The guy was supposed to be in bed because it was bedtime. As shit would have it, the guy was up getting a glass of freaking water, and the inexperienced guy was the guy who had to deal with the dude. So fortunately, being paired up with a very experienced guy, it was dealt with efficiently. But you can't plan for you to be in the right exact place where you've stored your gun to deal with a threat. Okay? It might be that your gun could be across in a completely the opposite end of the house when you need it, and you don't have a gun in every single room. So that's tool dependent, because you're relying on a gun to protect yourself when you might just need to fight. Okay, and you might need to understand a little bit more about that. Now, if somebody comes in the house with a gun and you're nowhere near it, you're not going to beat them anyway. Like, how are you ever going to beat that?
Right.
Like, you have to think of other things.
Right.
Like, how do I defeat this? Can I defeat this? What do I know? What fight skills do I know where I might be able to take that gun away or do things like, you have to think so much farther beyond being prepared.
Well, like in like silly things, right? Like, I would go out on a limb and say that most armed robberies happen by males.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would also go out on a limb and say that most armed robberies that are conducted by males are more than likely not wearing a cup. You know what I mean? Like,
More than likely.
there's things where you're not in a, like, I feel like when people think of, I'm going to plan for a bad situation, I'm going to maybe take a kickboxing class, or I'm going to take a, here's the problem with that. I've watched these kids now enter an altercation, right? Where they want to put two hands up and they want to get sideways and maybe try to work that lead leg a little bit, or it doesn't work like that. The guy's going to bum rush you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, when you're in those situations, remember to be scrappy. Remember to just have no shame, no fear. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if you lose, it's everything.
Yeah.
So you have nothing.
Yep.
You know, there's nothing that you can't use. There's
Yeah.
no rule. There's no law. There's no.
Yeah.
You're not going to get made fun of because you bit the guy or you punched him in the balls, or, you know, do whatever the fuck you got to do.
Yeah.
You know, to survive.
Yeah.
That's the game.
And like, what got us to that point was from the very start, like every day that we weren't doing that basic foundation training, everything beyond that was a contest. And it was a great contest because you're dealing with a bunch of huge egos that all want to kill each other. And yet there's always one guy who's going to win that day.
Right.
And it was never the same guy. You know, there were times where that same guy won a lot, but was never always winning because there were that many people like with that attitude is like, I'm fucking winning. And like that determination and the skill level to do that. And there wasn't cheating, okay? Like one example of training, you can look up on YouTube, the one-hole drill. There's one-hole drills all over the place. We used to play follow the hole, or chase the hole, I'm sorry. So chase the hole, we'd have a line of about 5 guys and about 5 to 3 yards. You know, we'd start at 3 yards. If everybody got that, we'd back up to 5. But the first shooter shoots a hole in the target. The second shooter that second shot has to touch the first shot. And each consecutive shot after that has to touch that hole. Has to touch it. If you miss touching that hole, then you start all over again.
Right.
And each team goes until every person in that line has hit that hole. So that's chase the hole. Versus the one-hole drill, where I'm going to shoot 10 rounds into the target and make 1 hole. So I can shoot my first target is just shoot the target. My next one, I can shoot close to it, but I don't have to touch it. And then my whole task is to connect those 2 dots the rest of the time. So to me, that's cheating because it's not as precise as chase the hole.
Right.
Where you have to, that second shooter is the most important one.
Right.
Where you have to hit that first shooter.
Right.
So that's just one example of just a lot of things that we did.
Right. And you're kind of stumbling onto something that I was curious about. I know myself, right? When shit started to kind of hit the fan here last couple of months, we've, without making any specifics, we've accumulated quite an armory. And, you know, when you do that, the thought process definitely crosses your mind of, you know, what happens if the day comes where we need all this shit. How important is it to train with the group that you plan to defend with? Like, see, when you were in the SWAT team, obviously, you know, not obviously, I'm sorry, but last time you explained that you trained individually before being brought in as a team. Did you see an exponential difference once you guys gelled together as a team?
Oh, absolutely.
So would it be fair to say that if you were planning a serious home defense, you might want to train with your team?
Absolutely.
You know, whether that be your mom, your dad, in my scenario, where it would be my mom, my dad, my brother, or, you know, I mean, if anything were to ever hit the fan, we would, you know, bundle.
Yeah.
So how important is that? I mean, how important is that for maybe somebody with a set of parents that aren't so pro-gun?
It's critical for any successful goal to train together. Now training with parents that aren't so pro-gun.
And I say parents, but obviously that could be anybody.
But it could be anybody, and that could come down to like having a sit down and a serious discussion.
Well, here's a much better analogy. A wife or a husband that's not pro-gun. Obviously, you need to break that wall. I mean, that's important.
It all starts with communication and understanding. And you can't, there comes a point where a person can't say, no, it's just never going to happen. You know, all you have to do is look at active shooter interviews where people were like, well, I never thought it would happen here.
Read the police activity in Beverly Hills in the last 7 months.
Yeah,
Talk about people that didn't think anything could ever happen to them.
Yeah. I mean, you cannot have that mentality these days and expect to get very far in life. I mean, you could be lucky. Shoot, you could be lucky. But you have a greater chance at this point in history of being unlucky. So get the education, talk about it, talk about reality. Don't talk about things that just aren't possible. You know, there's too much of that. Talk about reality, what's happening, and then that could lead into furthering your education and maybe actually like real planning on doing things. And it doesn't, if you're anti-gun, it doesn't have to involve a gun, because the last thing I want to do is give an anti-gunner a gun, because they're not going to bring anything positive to that solution. That's just not, it's not a good task for them.
Right.
Like, use people's strengths, you know, and the only way you can use their strengths is to start that communication and figure out like who can do what best.
Right.
Okay. And if the best thing you can do is this, then guess what? That's your job.
Right.
Because there's jobs for everyone if something really, really bad happens.
Right.
So.
And I think an important word when you think about that type of, I keep saying training. I guess maybe the better word would be planning. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're planning for a horrible event like that, and you know, say it's you and your significant other in the house, one thing that I think would go wrong is the step by step. You know, like, listen, if somebody comes in the house, I'm going to get the gun. You go to this place in the house. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe that was a bad decision because what you planned for didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Something that you didn't plan for happened. Now you are sending your person into a bad position. How important is it to stress the improv of the moment? You know, of the, listen, if shit hits the fan and something goes wrong, I'm going to get the gun and you follow me. You know what I mean? Or you're on me. You know, even if that person is useless with a gun, right. So don't give it to them.
Right. Right?
Might end up shooting you.
Right.
Right? But how important is that to stress that all of these situations are going to be different?
It's okay. Starts with communication. We get through all that. When it comes to actual, like, either talking about or performing physical activity, like what you're going to do, the whole improv needs to be worked in. It's super critical because you can't always have that plan where one person has to do one thing or else the plan falls apart.
Right.
Okay, there's got to be backups. Like the inexperienced guy who was the first to encounter the homeowner when we're in there, and that was not part of the plan. Well, he was paired up with an experienced guy who took over and dealt with it, where that's where that improv kicks in. And more people are multi-trained, if you want to call it that, to do different things, who can step in if a person fails. Because, again, you're not going to know failure until something actually happens. Like, you could be trained to do a couple different things, but when that stress level kicks in, you could just black out because whatever you were doing that day, you weren't prepared to deal with this that's happening right now. So you weren't ready to make that shift, and that's really important. So if you're caught by surprise, you're most likely going to black out,
right?
Because you're just not prepared. No, very few people are prepared to deal with a surprise, and it could be as stupid as, like, you know, you walk around a corner and there's your wife, like, standing there ready to scare you because you're playing a game, and you're like, holy fuck, yo,
right.
What the fuck?
Right.
It can be that simple. It's it's complex to go through everything and train for everything. That's why I say, like, you can't 100% train for everything.
Right.
You just train the best you possibly can to cover as much as you can, and you still may have that unlucky day.
Right. Like, I guess what comes to mind there is, you see in a movie, or you see that follow my voice. People are lost, people are in the dark, people are, I think it's really important to establish who is going to take the lead in bad situations, and I think it's really important to establish that, you do exactly as I say.
Yeah.
We were having a conversation when we were down in Morehead City for the World Championships about particularly when the BLM Antifa movement was going into restaurants and harassing people, and we had a conversation, and you said to me, do you really think that you're the type of person that would be able to, humbly move yourself out of that situation and, surrender the self-respect to ultimately survive? I said, absolutely not. I know I'm not that person. And it's not, I know it's funny, but it's not something really that you should be proud of. I mean, the goal is survival. Mm-hmm. And so as we continued that conversation, I had said to you, well, you would be that guy, and we happened to be with your wife and my girlfriend, which is your stepdaughter, and Sam, who also runs the podcast, because without her, this shit wouldn't run. We continued the conversation to where, like, the big thing there is in that situation, they're on you. Yeah. They're moving with you. Forget me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You have to ultimately survive. You have to do what's best for a group, or do what's best for. So it's very important when you're we were just initially talking about gun safety and ownership, but also in situations where you would want to use that gun, you have to be very clear about who is the leader. Yeah. And I think that's probably, and I'm guessing, something that you established very quickly in your career, was who was making the command, who was going where, who was doing what was your trigger? You know what I mean? Like, if you went into a house, what made you go left or right? What made you go up or down?
There was always a plan. There was always a leader. Okay, and the leadership changed throughout the years, but there was always a leader who made the plan. We always, I say always, but in the very beginning we didn't, but we learned the hard way that we changed to having our own surveillance, intelligence, all that work to figure out the layout of where we were going to go into the best we possibly could. And it broke down into having our own guys who would go to that location covertly, like, to go there and look at it without being recognized, and do a survey of the house where you just look at the windows of the house and you figure out how that house is laid out as far as the floor plan goes. And you can easily do that if you have a basic construction background. Right. So we would do that. So we would draw it out, and then right before we were going to go do that job, we would do what we call a tape drill, where we'd set out traffic cones in the parking lot to about the same size as that floor plan, and we practiced where the guys are going to go in that house through the tape drill. We'd literally be in the truck, get out of the truck, and go through that house, the fake house, it's a tape drill, before we were even in there. So we were programming ourselves to get through that house as fast as possible. We did encounter small changes in floor plans that we weren't able to see from outside, but because we did the tape drill, it was quickly remedied when we were in the house. So that's how we did things, and it was incredibly efficient, because literally before whatever job we were doing, we actually did the job in pretend before we did it. So we knew exactly what we were doing, and everything went smoothly always.
Right. And so the reason why I ask you that is because what comes to mind for me is that's not really, you were planning for a specific moment, for a specific house, for a specific situation. That way you were so well prepared that when you entered the house, it was a machine, right? People don't realize when we say that you can't prepare for all situations, you as a homeowner and having someone enter your home, which is the ultimate situation, right? For protection, right? You have the upper hand. You have been preparing for that moment since you set foot in that house.
Right.
You know that house better than anybody else, right? If I'm a criminal and I'm casing my own house, right? I could know it pretty well. From the outside, I could look in and say, okay, there's a bedroom in the back, there's a bedroom in the front, there's a stairway in the middle, right? But maybe once I got in there, I didn't know that there was a doggy gate on the stairs and that the lady had just did laundry and there's a pile of laundry on it. Now I'm making all kinds of noise and I'm slow. Now my heart's pumping and I made a mistake and I made noise and I'm not paying attention. Right? You as the homeowner, you know every inch of that house. So you can effectively prepare for the battleground. Right?
Absolutely, because your home is your castle, whatever. But you always know it better than anyone else, unless the bad guy is a family or friend,
right?
family,
Which is common as well.
It happens. It happens a lot. Who knows that area as well as you? But when you're dealing with just the random burglars who are going into houses for things, they'll never know it like you. So you have to understand that you already do have an upper hand. Unless you give it up.
Right.
So learning how to not give it up is the issue. And the wild card in there is being caught by surprise.
Right. And something that I wanted to ask you about as well in that same landscape is the one thing that can ruin all of your planning, is the element of surprise. And this is what I've always said. People that, the gun is in the safe, in the closet, in the bedroom. Okay? You're in bed, you wake up, and there's a guy holding the gun on you. That gun's useless now. Right. You have to take measures. I don't know whether that be an alarm system, whether that be a dog, whether that be, if you really want to do that situation right, you don't want to be caught off guard.
Yeah. Dogs are literally the most efficient way.
Right.
And now today, technology has provided us cameras, which are very reasonable. They record. So even if you're not home, you're still going to have great pictures. The resolution is unbelievable. So dogs first, cameras second is my list. Alarm companies not so much, because a camera is way more efficient.
But what about when you are home? I mean, like a camera's not going to alert you unless you have something like a Ring.
Yeah, they there's so many camera systems right now that have alerts to your phone when somebody's even coming near your house. So you could be asleep and set the alert up. Now, I mean, you got to be careful if you're in an area where there's a ton of animals and things that you could be woken up all night long. So you have to balance things.
Well, and there's some really fantastic stuff. I mean, I mentioned.
I want to go back to the mob thing too, just so you don't forget.
The what?
The mob thing in the restaurant.
Okay, yeah, so we could do that.
But we're talking about cameras now. So.
Well, it's just a quick point. The Ring, my whole family uses Ring, and it's really, really awesome. The really cool part about it is it changes the sensor of what will trigger an alarm and what won't, right? So you can set it to where it'll pick up the mailman putting mail in your mailbox, or it won't go off until I'm touching your front door.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of adjustment, and you're right. The resolution of the video that you get, it sounds silly, like you're paying for a clear video, but it's really important. Like I can remember when I was a kid, they would put criminals on the news, and it would be, well, we enhanced the photo, and it would be like this incredibly pixelated picture. Yeah. It could be anybody.
Like,
it could be
how am I going to figure out who that is?
It could be my next door neighbor. It could be Ted Nugent. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But what was your point there with the mob in the restaurants?
Going back to the mob where we were talking about things. When you did ask me what I would do, and it's basically an understanding of mobs, because especially in a restaurant or when you're out in the town, whatever you want to do, they don't know you. They have no idea who you are. So my response was when they come up to me, and if it's Black Lives Matter or Antifa, the safest way that you can change the tide on them, because they're there to destroy shit. Who that's what they're there for. Okay, we know that. the safest way for you to survive and everyone in your group to survive is to become part of the mob.
Right.
So that's what you have to do, because they literally do not know who you are.
Right.
So if Black Lives Matter comes up and it wants to berate you and do different things to you, well, you become Black Lives Matter and move in, like kind of mold into that mob. Now, some people can't do that. That's just not in their mentality. It's not the best thing to do to survive, because you need to think about survival, and that's like a whole other topic. Right. Antifa, F the police. Like, that's like, let's destroy the government. Like, things like that. You need to mold into that mob to survive. Right. And as soon as you see an out, get out, get away from that.
Which and doesn't require some kind of like ninja training.
No, it requires no training.
All you have to do is go, wait, I'm with you guys. Yeah, it's not hard, you know. It's not.
Maybe pick up your dinner plate and throw it up against the wall, or do something. Right. You know, whatever they're doing. Like,
whatever you got to do.
Yeah.
You know, I and unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know what. You know, I'm not really that kind of person, and I think it's really important too to understand what kind of person you are.
You have to. Yeah. You have to.
And there's a lot of easy things you can do, you know, applied adversity. I mean, you could just put yourself in any situation where there's competition or adversity and do a little soul searching. Yep. Get in that, you know, go to pay the $50, support your local Taekwondo instructor. You know what I mean? Go in there and just ask them if you can hit mitts for a second with them, or roll, you know, go through the class and maybe do a little sparring. Find out how easily you get your ass kicked, number one.
Right.
Number two, find out what happens. Find out what happens to you. How do you feel? Is your heart beating so hard that you feel like it's in your throat?
Yeah.
Or are you cool as a cucumber? You know, figure out what the best course of action is.
The worst thing you could do with a mob is misjudge them and like go against them and then have the mob pile on you.
Yeah.
Because they've already done it. It's more than enough times.
I don't care if you're Bruce Lee, they're going to get you.
And they have really, really destroyed people. And that's not, I don't want to see anybody in that position.
And you know what it is too, I don't know if this is really the goal. You know, people talk to me about, and I think since the election, we've all found out that we had a lot of left-leaning friends that we didn't know about. And I keep getting educated about these protesters. It's peaceful. It's these groups that the Republicans are sending to make it crazy. Okay, whatever. Whatever the goal is, whoever's who or whoever's paid to do what, here's the moral of the story. There is dozens of videos of these people that get in a hand-to-hand fight. They get knocked out. And then they get kicked in the face 30 times.
Yeah. And
they die. And I don't know if the purpose of these mobs is to kill somebody, or if it's to send a message, or if it's just they're a little violent. I gotta believe in my heart that nobody wants to kill anybody.
Right.
But I think at the same time, people are so unaware of how easy it is to kill somebody.
Well, the example I'm going to draw directly off of that is on my cover photo of Facebook right now. I have the cover picture of Ordinary Men. It's about the Reserve Police Battalion 101 from World War II and what they did from the late spring of 1942 for the next 11 months. And like the title suggests, it's ordinary men who were in a police battalion and facilitated and directly murdered a ridiculous amount of Jews. And that's the mob. So to understand the mob and what they're capable of, you can't just look at an individual and say that individual is out to kill someone today. Because, okay, there's psychopaths out there that are. But when the mob takes over, it's like a whole new dimension where they're empowering each other, and they'll do things that they never ever planned or wanted to do.
Tribal mindsets.
And it's really dangerous. And that tribal mindset, which is so prevalent today, is extremely dangerous. So to understand it is critical to your own survival, to anyone's survival.
Right.
Because they're capable of murdering people.
Right. And it should be, the most important aspect of it is avoiding that altercation altogether.
Big time.
Because like there's a video, the guy's driving like a Ford F-150, I believe it was in Seattle. They run him off the road, they pull him out of the car, they beat him to death in front of his wife. Mm-hmm. There's not much, if you watch that video, that would make you, cringe. If you've seen fights, or if you've never seen a fight, or if you've never seen anybody get hurt, it would maybe make you cringe a little bit. It's just a guy getting punched in the face and getting knocked out. Mm-hmm. Until he gets kicked in the head. Mm-hmm. That was where I went, I didn't even know the outcome. I just saw the video, and I went, that's not good. When you're unconscious, when something happens to you to where you lose consciousness, generally there's a lot of brain swelling. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of concussions involved in losing consciousness. There's a lot of bad things that go with that. But then when you have added damage, okay, it's why when you watch mixed martial arts fights, and I emphasize mixed martial arts because its audience has grown exponentially lately. A lot of people are getting in tune with this. Mm-hmm. When you see a guy like Herb Dean, jump in after 2 or 3 punches, and you're like, that was way too early. That was way too early of a stoppage. He saw something. That guy's eyes were rolling around in his head. He was breathing funny. He wasn't moving the same. All things that you couldn't pick up on a camera. Right. He stopped it real quick, right? Why? Because in that moment, it is life or death. Mm-hmm. You can kill somebody that way, that easily. You don't need a gun.
Yeah, he was already out of it, and now any additional injury is compounded, like you said, and really at risk, risking a person's life.
Right. And so now you apply this to a situation in the street where people are soccer kicking an unconscious man in the face. The force behind a soccer kick. There's a reason it's illegal in MMA. You can stand on your feet, spin around in a circle, and wheel kick somebody in the temple. Legal. You cannot kick somebody in the face when they're on the ground. Yeah. The force that you can produce, okay, will certainly bring you close to death. These are things that these mobs are doing, mainly because they don't understand what they're doing. They think they're just going to beat the shit out of you. There may be a few of them that are out to kill people. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but that is how simple it is. Yeah. You can't find yourself in that scenario.
Yeah. Percentages of people throughout our society are very close to mirroring each other. Like that mob, just like ordinary men with the police battalion, there were absolute killers in that group. People who enjoyed killing. Just like there's killers in an Antifa group or a Black Lives Matter group, or let's even go with a right-wing group. Whatever group you're in, there's a person or persons in there who would draw enjoyment out of hurting and or killing humans. They're psychopaths. That's the way they're built. Right. That's a problem because if they get into leadership, they could create that whole mob thing where the majority of the ordinary people in there could cause a problem and follow that killer, which happened, and it's happened throughout history, where that mob is absolutely violent and murderous and vicious and things that we're supposed to recognize and steer away from. But I see a lot of history repeating itself again.
Right.
So technical difficulties. That camera stopped working.
Oh, shit. Okay. Well, hang on. We'll figure it out 1 second. All right. Sorry, folks. We had some technical difficulties, but where we left off, we were talking about the mob mentality of today and how if you look in history, it's so apparently obvious of how to avoid history from repeating itself. A group that was in my head before we kind of lost track was the Ku Klux Klan, and what really defined their success was them being widely accepted, and what they were doing being widely accepted. And if you look at today, by today's standards, it's about as radical as you can get before you start to piss off all parties involved, but they're certainly promoted by the left. And you see where they kill someone in the street, or that situation where that mentally disturbed guy shot the Trump supporter point blank. The family detested him and wrote him off. And there's a perfect example of somebody where a little bit of intervention could have been good. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's history literally repeating itself.
Yeah, and you can literally summarize whether it's the group, the mob that we're talking about right now, or the individual as an active shooter. These are things that are accepted and allowed and even promoted to an extent throughout history. These things would have never happened if they weren't allowed to happen in the first place. So we're seeing things happen that are absolutely unacceptable at all levels, like complete anarchy, violence directed from one human to another human over a political stance is unacceptable at all levels. We were a country growing up, when I was growing up, the diversity in races and religions, diversity in everything was what gave our country its strength. And that has been literally turned on its head today because they don't want diversity. They're pushing tribalism. They're pushing division, and people are eating it up. It's like a big plate of shit, and they're just eating it up. So you can look at history. All these things have been allowed. They're being allowed today, and it all has a breaking point. So are the so-called leaders going to step up and stop this and say enough? Or are they going to continue to allow it to happen till the breaking point? So that's what our future holds.
Right. And there's something that people in the UFC started saying. The UFC fighters come from all over the world. And the fighters that come from outside of America may not come with the same technical skill. Sometimes they come with more technical skill. But they all come with this odd amount of toughness. And what they've began calling it is that immigrant mentality, right? And that's what America had was that toughness. We are and we're all immigrants. I think what you see, and that was very apparent in the 2020 election, was that Trump seemed to have a lot of the Latino vote, a lot of the immigrant vote, minority vote, primarily of that, a large number of it was working class males. Now, I think what was so terrifying to them and to a lot of us was that with Joe Biden came the radical left. And what they're pushing is socialism, which is knocking on the door of communism. Mm-hmm. And you see these Cuban Americans in Florida that are so passionately against that. Ask them why. Listen to some of their interviews why they're terrified of being under that dictatorship again, of having your rights stripped away from you and told when you can do things and where you can do things and who's going to protect you. And that's the direction we're going. I'm not saying that Joe Biden's in for the next 4 years. They're going to be working tirelessly of turning this country into, say, China. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is electing Joe Biden and basically with Joe Biden comes obviously Kamala, but you wind up with Bernie Sanders, AOC, that whole radical left. You're nudging the ball down that hill. And I think these mobs, I think they all kind of have something in common where you may have a leader of the mob that understands the goal and what they're trying to achieve, but I'm not so sure that the people that are in these mobs completely understand what the goal is that they're pushing towards. And by causing the destruction and wreaking havoc on our cities and the poor Americans that literally lost their lives due to this, and as you said, not a religious stance, a political stance. Since when did America become a country where everybody was in this hive thinking of where I'm on the right, so I only think like people on the right. I'm on the left, I only think like people on the left. Whatever happened to the backbone of America, the independent thinker?
Yeah, the simplicity of we can agree to disagree. That's lost. Like it's like such a rare occurrence that anybody will even ever say that or think that anymore. It's like if you don't agree with me, then death to you. It's and literally on social media is destroying everything, because their social media is given the people of saying whatever they want without consequence on the left, because there's some pretty crazy stuff that is allowed to stay. People on the right are being put in Facebook jail or being shadow banned or what have you. It's like there's clear things going on that it shouldn't happen. But then they'll fall back on, well, Facebook is a private company, so they can do whatever they want, and you know what, they can, and they're doing it. We're still, obviously we'll do things on Facebook. I'm trying to do a lot less, because lately I see just sickening behavior by humans, and it's something that I don't accept. It's unacceptable to me. So I try to pull back and just hey, real life is pretty freaking important, because there's like imaginary life on social media, and then also in real life we see a lot of the political plates that are given to the followers, if it's people on the left or people on the right, what have you, whatever plate that you're fed, you only eat what's given to you. But with that socialist, and I go with neo-Marxist, communist, however the left direction is going, it's so far to the left that people just eat the plate that's given to them. It's a plate of utopia, and they fail to look any deeper at what's underneath the tyranny that would follow that type of government and way of life is unimaginable, unlike anything that we've ever seen in history. So because of what they're talking about,
the reach is also so much different. Like when you look at history, you're 1,000,000% right, and I think that I would stick my neck out and say that most Americans realize the damage that social media is doing. There's a point within itself there. When you're talking about social media, the one big issue with it in terms of actual social interaction is preconceived notion, right? So if I'm friends with Steve Adams on Facebook and I see that Steve Adams shares Donald Trump is nominated for second Nobel Peace Prize, and I'm on the left, I say, oh, he's a Trump supporter. Now, fast forward 2 weeks, I run into you at the local bar. When I walk up to you, for whatever reason, the media as well as social media has driven this point home that if you're on the left or you're on the right, that we can't coexist. Now, knowing because of social media that you're on the right and I'm on the left, there's a preconceived notion. Now, when I interact with you, it's going to be different. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why, because prior to that, maybe you're an Eagles fan, maybe I'm a Giants fan. That doesn't mean I'm not going to talk to you. That doesn't mean I don't, it's just crazy to me how people have been so influenced by that. The bigger point of that is that when you say social media, particularly Facebook, but, Twitter's in there, Instagram's in there, it's all in there. Facebook does a really bad job of saying, this is a private company, so we can do what we want. I do agree with that. I think that if you look at ISIS recruitment happening through Facebook Messenger, there's a lot of ways where Facebook needs to be able to put their foot down. But if I started a private company today, mm-hmm. and my sole goal was to deface the DNC, I would be denied a license. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be incredibly apparent that Facebook has an issue with the right, and it's not being handled fairly. So this is where you get into that sticky conversation of regulation. Mm-hmm. And I think that social media needs to be government regulated, but it's terrifying to even think about handing the government any more power at this moment.
They're already way, way beyond. Like we're monitored in every way possible, and that's Snowden came out and took care of that one. Like when literally people in government were saying, no, we don't do anything like that, he came out and was like, oh yeah, we do. Yeah. We're doing it now. So
And they're
Yep.
so afraid of the information that he retains that even just as recently as publishing his first book, it was deshelved by the government, and also they kept his proceeds as well.
Awesome.
As a parting gift.
And that government power that they have right now and are using goes right in line with my statement that the tyranny that will follow will be worse than anything we've ever seen in history, will be driven by that technology, because we are literally monitored at every step we make, everything we do. And the social media, what's driving that division, it's like literally on purpose. It's like we're a social experiment at this point. Being it's talked about with the election, where there's the companies out there that really came to front in the 2016 election and were absolutely used this past election, are taking those the individuals that are on the fence, they call it, and hammering them with ads of one side or the other to get them into a tribe, to get them off of the fence. And they're literally being manipulated. We're all being manipulated in a certain way. And if you can't or won't, or say the government isn't doing anything like that, you're just so naive. It's crazy, because the stuff is happening. And you can, well, that's just conspiracy theories. It's like, it's all documented. It's happened, it's happening. And if allowed to continue, they're just getting further and further ahead of themselves. And to crack down, one of the guys I follow who survived the Balkan Wars, and he runs survival schools about it. His name's Selko. He talks about different things that will occur when the shit hits the fan. And one of the things that's really important is taking guns away from law-abiding citizens, because you have no way of defending yourself. When you take away guns, you can't defend yourself against guns. Even though the government has way bigger guns than we'll ever have. Like, civilians can't take their civilian guns and go against a tank. I mean, that's just stupid. Or go against a drone. Like, let's think on the grand scheme of things. Like, taking away guns from law-abiding citizens accomplishes nothing but making them completely defenseless. And throughout history, those defenseless people have been abused and destroyed. So there's so many things we can go into in that whole world that are happening today, and people need to accept that, and not even right and left, there's a huge reliance on government, but through different paths. Like, the right relies on government with certain things, and the left relies on government with certain things. But to rely on government at all, when it gets down to the small portion of people, they're not coming to save you. That's it. Like, this thing about, report your neighbors because if they have more than 10 people, they're a threat to COVID and super spreaders and this and that. Hello, your neighbors are supposed to take care of you if something goes wrong. And now they're literally encouraging neighbors to report other neighbors. And people are doing it. Like, it blows me away. Like, how could you ever do that?
I think that people have a poor sense of forward thinking anymore. I think that's been ushered in the last decade with, why would you think? Your thinking's done for you. Yeah. You have not only a phone in your pocket, but a computer in your pocket at all times. Probably most people that'll click on this show will click on it on their phone. And at every turn, you run into somebody trying to tell you what you think. Mm-hmm. If you click on Facebook, there's now ads that you can't reject. There's now, sponsorships that Facebook pushes on you. There's all these algorithms. There was a comedian, Chris D'Elia. I believe it was Chris D'Elia. It was. That Google searched nothing, or YouTube searched nothing but puppy videos for like a month. And not only on YouTube, but across all of his platforms. I mean, Amazon, Google, every social media, every ad would be about, puppies, collars, leashes. The algorithm is in everything now. And when you say that they're surveilling you, people will generally use the okay, but for what? I don't do anything wrong. Why would they be surveilling me? Or if they are surveilling me, good for you. I don't do nothing wrong. It's at a much bigger level than that. It is down to what toaster you want for Christmas. You know what I mean? They know everything.
It's legit manipulation.
Yeah.
Through social media, through marketing, and it's all to benefit. It's all to benefit the people we never see, who hold all the money.
Right.
And it's amazing. Like, it's amazing to me that manipulation gets us, regular people who struggle to make money and are out working, to give money to other charitable organizations, when that's all driven by the people who hold all the money, who would never do that.
Right.
Who could actually maybe solve some things, but they're in the shadows, and that's some real crazy shit.
Right. And people, I think also that, and it's a pretty normal, it's like a knee-jerk reaction for some people to say, the government would never do that. I will not get into this conversation publicly out of respect, but when the 9/11 theories start rolling around, the big one is, well, there's two. The government would never do that. Could the government ever afford to get caught doing something like that? There's that type of answer to it, right? Well, when we were driving home from Moorhead, I put on a podcast for you. I don't remember the guy's name. It was on the Joe Rogan Experience, where he talks about his life's work of investigating the Manson murders and Manson, and really it does a great job exposing MK Ultra. Most people that probably watch my show are probably familiar with Joe, and if you've watched Joe at all, he talks about MK Ultra a lot. And this was a mind control program put into play by the CIA. And it's been proven that Manson was a CIA operative. If you think for 1 second that 60 years ago they were fucking around with mind control, that they're not trying to control you right now with things that you actually want in your hand, let alone it being forced upon you. I mean, it's ridiculous. The fact that people will believe one conspiracy theory and not another makes no sense. If you're going to say, the government's surveilling you, they're probably looking through my camera right now on my laptop, and I go, no way. But then I'll say, well, they probably killed Kennedy. You can't, if you're going to give one the time of day, you got to give the other one the time of day. And people are so afraid to admit that they believe one thing or another. And I think it comes, risk takers. America was full of risk takers. You had people like Martin Luther King. That was a risk taker. That was a guy that believed in what he believed in what he said, believed in how he felt, believed in love, believed in equality, believed in all these things, and took a risk. Went out there and started saying things that weren't normal. Nowadays, there's no risk. If you have something in your heart that you really believe or that you really want to get across, you go on Facebook, you type it in the search bar, and you find 50,000 people that feel the same way you do. So now, instead of taking a measured approach, right? If I were to say, let's just, for the sake of the conversation, I'm anti-gun. And I truthfully believe that it's really, really bad. When I approach Stephen Adams about anti-gun ideology, right? Or, however you want to define that, I would approach that very carefully, right? I wouldn't want to say anything that would upset you. I'm trying to get my point across. I want you to hear me out, have an open mind. I don't want to shut you off immediately, right? Well, that's gone now. Now people go on the internet, find a shitload of people that feel the same way they do, and they enter that same conversation with a whole lot of confidence, right? Because they went to I'mRight.com, copy and pasted all the facts that weren't even facts, that just align with what you were trying to say, and now you vomited at me, right? That's not a conversation. That's not right, and people aren't thinking for themselves. They're not speaking for themselves. And it's really, really bad. I mean, the joke to me is the last 5-6 years people have been, when's the AI going to come? When's the robots going to come? When's technology just going to take over the world? It already is. You're the fucking robot.
Yep. You're you're the experiment. The word you used a few times there is feel. The groups that are doing all this social manipulation have figured out a long time ago, and are using it to their massive benefits. Is we are creatures of emotion, and our emotions will overrule our thoughts. If you don't have that control, if you are able to think for yourself, and a lot of people will be like, well, I can think for myself, but then they're in an echo chamber and they can't get out of it, and they don't even know they're in it. So, that's an issue where, at least look at where you're at. Am I in an echo chamber? Like, okay, I'm in an echo chamber to a certain extent. I still try to think for myself, but I'm also able to say, yeah, I'm in an echo chamber because I have conservative beliefs, and that's my echo chamber. I won't delete, block, not talk to people who aren't conservatives, because that's not me, because I want to hear what they have to say. I've been blocked by who knows how many because they don't want to hear what I have to say.
Right.
And that's on them. It's not on me.
And you stumbled onto a really important thing there, where you spoke about an echo chamber, which is exactly what we're in right now.
I hear the echoing.
And sorry for the folks at home, man. It's pouring out, and I'm in a steel building. But the echo chamber was bad enough. Now you've coupled it with cancel culture, okay, to where the echo chamber gives everybody safety, right? Everybody feels the same way. Everybody says the same thing. Everybody sees the same way, And then you have the cancel culture, where what it takes to swing around an echo chamber. If you have a hive mentality of a bunch of people that all feel the same way, think the same way, striving towards the same goal, there's a point where, if that goal that they're striving towards is bad, there's a point where a group of those people will realize that. Cancel culture has taken that group and made them irrelevant. So now we're the blind literally leading the blind. And what's terrifying about it is, look at the importance that the American people have placed on the opinion of celebrities. That is fucked up. Yeah. I've heard more people say to me, I'll never watch a Robert De Niro movie again, because he hates Donald Trump. Yeah. First of all, who gives a fuck what Robert De Niro thinks? If you don't want to watch his movies anymore, don't watch his movies anymore. But who gives a fuck what Robert De Niro thinks? Yeah. If Robert De Niro came here and sat down in that chair over there and said, here's my credentials, here's my qualifications, I served in this form of government, and I was this and I was that, and I can tell you from my long-standing career that Donald Trump just wouldn't be a good president. I'd say, all right, I don't agree with you, but you
presented a case.
I understand. If your credentials is you were really good at talking like this, get the fuck out of here, man. I don't want to hear what you have to say. Yeah.
But they're taking advantage of that emotional connection with a fan base who literally listens to them and idolizes them.
Mind control.
It really is.
People don't realize that it doesn't have to be so extreme. It doesn't have to be. When I say mind control, people think I'm going to go, Sam brings me a Hot Pocket. Doesn't work. You know what I mean? What mind control is for a week while she's sleeping. I said, bring me a Hot Pocket. Bring me a Hot Pocket. She never even noticed it. That's what they're doing. They're not doing this thing where they're turning everybody into Terminators. They're doing this thing where they're making everybody believe in something. Right. And which is great. That's what propaganda was. That's what World War II. The political campaign in World War II that revolutionized this country to fight a war across an ocean against the most formidable opponent ever, right? That was propaganda. That was mind control. That was all the way back then. The Nazis are bad. It's the end of the world. And they were. I'm not saying they weren't. But that was what they did. They drove the American people to believe in something. And that, in and of itself, is probably the most powerful thing on earth.
Yeah. And it happened after 2001. 9/11. They've learned how to manipulate us, and they're manipulating us every day. Every day we're into our phones or into our computers, on social media. It's complete manipulation, and it's pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
So.
And people's, I think people's faith has diminished. That's another thing. Faith, however you feel about faith. I recognize that there's people that don't believe in a religion or don't, whatever the case may be. Everybody has faith in something, and with that being somewhat removed from America, removing it from schools, removing it from, whatever, it's not a good thing because it kept people in check. People don't have faith that the information they're receiving is true. There was about a year's time where people would come up to me and say, "Did you see that video on Facebook?" And I go, "Nah, none of them things are true." That's how I used to feel. None of that's true. Yeah. It's all bullshit. And I felt that way. And for some reason now, when I watch right-wing videos, I go, yeah, that person's definitely trying to take over the world. And I realized that in myself. I used to look at that and go, that's bullshit. Yeah. But now I look at it and my head goes, Bill Gates, why is he making vaccines? It's bad. They've conditioned you to not think for yourself.
Yeah. Why? Let's just, the people who are doing this, let's just say, let's make things easy for the masses. Like, they don't have to think about anything, and it's that much easier to control them because they don't have to think. And at that level, like, hey, if I don't have to think, well, that's an easy life, so I'm going to do it.
And then look at how they classified the people that would be the opposite of what you're describing, right? Look at the welfare versus working class argument, right? Why should the working class pay for all these lazy people? Some people really need welfare. There's a lot of people that rape the system. And so you look at that argument and you think to yourself, why am I going to work so hard to give it away to somebody else? Why am I going to, right? And it creates this division. They've been learning how to control both sides of that argument forever. Yeah. They've kept us pitted against each other. They've kept... If America would have said, we need welfare because you're an able-bodied American, you have drive, you have a job, you're successful, you're good in life, all of these things have been afforded to you by a bunch of people that work really hard to keep this country safe and whole, right? It is your duty to take care of your neighbor. People would feel better about that. But then when you go to the grocery store and I have $200 and it's my last $200 and I won't have a paycheck for 2 weeks and there's a chick in front of me swiping an EBT card, buying 3 packs of cigarettes and scratch-offs.
Yeah.
There's a point where your algorithm doesn't fuck with my brain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that what's going to happen in this country is more and more people are going to start to realize what's happened. And I truthfully believe that the most powerful thing on planet Earth is not a nuclear bomb or an ICBM or what it is the American people. Yeah. We have an ability, unlike any other population, to bind together. Yeah. But we are also very good at running apart.
Well, yeah, we can be driven apart, which has happened, and the education is extremely important. Like, to be educated will give you the ability and the power to think for yourself and question things and be like, well, is that the best thing to be doing, or is that the best way, or what? Because the people swiping those EBT cards, why would I stop? I'm getting free shit. Like, literally, they're not going to stop. So at some point, here's another line. That line is getting close to being crossed, where people who are out working their asses off, paying taxes, which go to programs like that, are going to be like, yo, I'm paying too much in taxes. I'm literally killing myself working for somebody else to get free shit. Like, that's not the way the world works. And as far as faith goes, faith has been, I do buy into the war on Christianity, and I certainly, my road to faith was a long one, like most of my life, until I took Jesus as my Savior. So it provides structure. There's so much good in there, so much understanding that can come out of the Bible. That's just, it blows me away. Like, I continually read the Bible and learn so much more. And it's literally the most amazing book that has ever been written. People can argue it, and like, same way with right and left, and Christians and Muslims and atheists and whatever. Like, I'll listen to them all, and I won't discount them because that's the way they believe. Because I've gone through many steps to get to where I'm at in my own faith, and I believe that's for a reason. So having understanding, listening to other people, regardless of their faith, their race, their political stand, anything, that's important to me. And I do feel that it should be important to everyone. Just the fact that we're able to listen to each other, because that's another manipulation that people's ears have literally been closed.
Right. And I think that what you just said plays a big part in their plan, right? There's a Netflix right now, Netflix documentary right now on all of the people that were hurt by the Church of Scientology. And I've known about this story for a long time. A lot of people just thought it was some silly thing that Tom Cruise was invested with, right? But what it basically is a guy in the 60s, I don't, forgive me, I'm not like super up on all their names and everything, but he developed Scientology in somewhat good faith and then turned it into a big money machine that was tax exempt, right? Well, they spend a lot of time, money, and resources on keeping people quiet about what goes on inside the Church of Scientology. And it's a very interesting documentary, and it's very horrible what happens to a lot of these people. And they're now directly, they're partnered with the Nation of Islam. So I've, for a long time, felt this about the Nation of Islam. It's a scary thing to think that people would use religion as a launch pad.
Oh, it's always been that way.
But they do.
And that's what drove me away from religion for so many years, because I wasn't able to see through that. I looked at it with resentment.
Right.
Like, if this is what I see, where religion is used in this way to control, then that's all it is. It's not real. But as I sit here today, it is real when you take it the real way.
Right. And I think that, unfortunately, like anything else, we're losing a lot of the education and realness of religion as time goes on. I think that that's really the case in most things, But what scares me about that documentary coming out is a lot of people already feel that way. Like, I have friends of mine that'll say, like, I don't go to church, man. It's just a money thing. It's just a money grab. They send around a basket. They keep you there for 2 hours, give you a piece of shitty bread, and on your way you go. Because that's what you took out of it. That's what you got from it. I think a lot of everything that you deal with in everyday life is your perspective, and yeah, I mean, as long as they're making documentaries about these, shysters, like, the Church of Scientology is right there with Bernie fucking Madoff, and I think, unfortunately, people are having their confidence in things like this stripped away, and I think that we're just on a really bad path. I mean, social media, the new technology, I mean, it's created this void for content where people just all day long need to be entertained by something. And you're finding yourself now into this time warp of, you find your lane, you stay in that lane, you only believe things that way, and it's just not good. I mean, look at the whole premise of our first show is the way police are being treated in today's world, and I truthfully fear for my police friends.
Absolutely.
Because everything that we're talking about right now is being done to the American people about police, and it's terrifying. It's it's the way they've been discounted, the way the public's trust and confidence has been stripped away, and there's nothing you can do about it. There is, but there's nothing you can do about it from, the outside looking in.
It becomes a complex problem because this is something, like I said prior, that has occurred through decades. This degradation of the police it's taken decades to happen. So typically when something negative happens, it takes that much longer to put it back together the right way.
Right.
So it's become a complex political problem at this point where people in politics are literally using the police to benefit them, to benefit whatever agenda they want, and to fix that is going to take, it's such an uphill battle and so many years and commitment from other individuals who would support the police and see a problem, and then you can't just replace the people who are doing these evil things with the police. You now have to have this whole community understand or be reprogrammed to be like, you've just been fed a bunch of shit for the last 3 decades, and for the past decade, like even 15 years, it's really been bad.
Right.
It was all wrong. Here's the right way. Like, who's gonna fucking believe that?
Right.
Like,
unfortunately, what you just said applies to everything.
it does.
It applies to absolutely everything. The way people think about the political system, the way people think about our governing body, everything. That's what it is. The last 30 to 40 years, the manipulation of the public's thought process has been in full play, and it's been a full court press.
Right.
They haven't stopped on any wavelength.
No.
And I don't see it slowing down.
Yeah.
I think that the sad truth of the time period we're in now is America is gonna change.
It's happening.
We're in a transition.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be Americans and American patriots and God-loving people that can stand up and say, "Hey, we can't lose these core values."
Yeah, I agree. And here's something I disagree with, which it's something that has occurred literally over the past 20 years. So, and it's police related. So when we were doing our jobs, our SWAT jobs, we all had handguns, and we either had maybe one MP5, a submachine gun, or 2 at the most. Okay, we did everything that way, and we were extremely efficient because when you're in a structure, you have to navigate small areas. So the handgun is really the most efficient thing, the quickest way you can navigate those areas. Over the past 20 years, we've been at war, and guys have been overseas using rifles, and when they come back, they bring the rifles into police. Police are lazy. They see that shooting a rifle is so much easier than shooting a handgun. Like, I can be way more accurate with a rifle than I can ever be with a handgun. So because of that ease, it boosts my ego, it boosts my confidence. A rifle is always way more cooler than a handgun. Like, it just, that's what is marketed. So SWAT teams have become rifleized, if you want to call it that. Like, minimal SWAT teams today will go into homes with handguns now. They're going through clearing these small structures with rifles. The movement through these houses with rifles is so much more inefficient, and it could be split seconds at times. But again, when you get into a fight, split seconds matter. The handgun is so much more efficient when you're clearing small areas and doing things like that versus moving this rifle, which is way bigger. So that's something that I'm against, because I've already gone through and done it with the handgun, realize how efficient that is, and I've seen people go through with rifles, and I've worked with the rifle myself. I would choose the handgun every day. It's just a better tool to use. And my analogy would be, looking back at the tunnel rats in Vietnam, how many of those guys were jumping into the holes with their rifles and a flashlight to go clear a tunnel out? it's a confined space.
Right.
Give me my 45 and my flashlight, and I'm going to go get the job done.
Right.
But we've lost. That's like lost. People don't even think anymore. They're like, well, they're carrying rifles. We're going to carry rifles. And the laziness kicks in. Well, I'm way more accurate with a rifle. And half of them, I'm going to take a guess, have never even fired a rifle in a confined space.
Right.
Like, just go into a confined space and shoot a rifle and then shoot a handgun and tell me which one you like better.
Right.
Like, even with ears on, like the pressure of a rifle going off in a little room is insane.
Right. Especially with the thought process that most people have, bigger's better.
Oh, my God.
You talk to people, you never hear about, I got my 22. No, it's I got that, my 308, I got my SCAR set up.
Yeah.
What you don't realize is you shoot that in a hallway, your vision's going to be blurry.
Yeah.
It's, the concussive nature of that rifle will totally disorient you in a small space like that.
I'll tell you, like, jumping off on that, like, of course, I have an AR. Somebody else has an AR. I just picked up a CMMG 22 bolt conversion kit for the AR. Unbelievable. Like,
right.
So with that conversion, you remove the bolt carrier group that would fire the 5.56 223 out of your AR, and you put this CMMG 22 LR bolt carrier in, and you're able to fire 22 LR rounds out of it. Unbelievable. Like, you could have fun all day long. Plus, the way ammo is right now, like, you can get 22 ammo fairly cheap still, at least cheaper than the other stuff, and have fun with it all day. It's rather accurate. If you're going to just stick within that, like, 35, 40, maybe 50-yard range just to go target practice. But that's just one thing that you can do with your AR that is it's wonderful, and it's not expensive. I highly recommend it. I don't know if they'll come in for sponsorship or anything like that.
Well, and you're right. When I first started shooting, my brother had, when I was a kid, had started me off on a 22. It was a SIG. I don't remember the model. I for some reason I believe it was just called a SIG 22. Mm-hmm. But
a lot of the handguns are.
Well, like, this was a rifle.
Yeah.
And I thought I was invincible. Mm-hmm. I could hit anything, do anything. It was light. Mm-hmm. There was no recoil. My shoulder didn't hurt. My ears didn't hurt. I had an enjoyable day of shooting, mm-hmm. right? But what the big picture of that is, I came away ultimately very confident in using that firearm, right? There was nothing to scare me. There was nothing. It was really a good round to start off with. And if people want to say, 22s aren't, necessarily powerful enough, well, what do you need?
Yeah.
A 22 will most definitely put a hole in somebody.
And that always gets me to the shot placement argument, which is the only argument with me. I don't care what you have. Like, the trend in ammunition, I'll say right now, is 9mm. Like, a bunch of government agencies have switched to 9mm over the past few years. Civilian population is all over 9mm ammo, so much that you can't even get it right now. But that is a legitimate trend right now. People are all over 9mm, and I started in 9mm Glock way back in '89, and we moved to the 40 cal. So I've been 40 cal ever since. It doesn't matter what you are; it matters where you hit. Shot placement is everything. Stopping power is a bunch of bullshit, and it's just a stupid argument that seems to never go away. The only time where I noticed an absolute difference was when I was in steel matches versus a 9mm with my 40, where the 9s had to double tap the steel to knock it down, and that one shot in the 40 would knock it down. So that was the only difference throughout the years that I noticed a difference personally. But beside that, stopping power, knockdown power, that's all marketing tools. It's all bullshit. It's to keep a bunch of talking heads talking, and it's crap.
Right.
Shoot what you got to shoot. And who cares what you got?
Yeah, that argument's just about as good as when Ford shows you that it can tow the space shuttle.
Hey.
You know what I mean? It's like people see that and they go, "Oh, well, my Chevy can't do that." You know, at the end of the day, neither one of them can do that. And it's like, it's funny because it's like, I don't care if you have a 45, a 9, a 22, a 38. I don't give a shit what you're shooting.
Yeah.
It's where you put it.
Yeah. And it goes back to comfort too. Whatever you're most comfortable shooting will give you the best results.
Right.
Because you're comfortable. When you're like, okay, I wouldn't let Sammy or Lindsay shoot the 40. I mean, they can shoot it, but I wouldn't want them shooting that when it really mattered.
Right.
Like, okay, 9mm, much better. I know you'll shoot better with it. And that's the way it works.
Right.
Because it's a more comfortable round.
Again, back to, and it's so funny, maybe I'm onto something, but back to the golf thing. When you have somebody start off playing golf, you don't hand them a driver, you hand them a 9-iron. Something that's easy to hit, you know? And it's funny because people always relate this conversation to some kind of like, you know, either people are like terrified by what we're talking about. Why would you want a gun? It kills people. You know, or they're the other way where they believe that every situation requires a gun. You know, I carry my gun everywhere. You know, and it's like I understand both thought processes completely, but people need to really tune into what it takes to really effectively carry that weapon.
Absolutely, and there's a middle ground because I got a video saved somewhere of, and it's the argument for like gun people, like a gun will save everything. Well, the video shows people getting literally getting stabbed to death, and the gun. There's not even any time for a gun.
Right.
Like, and they're stabbed to death. Like, or you could literally be beaten to death and never be able to get to your gun.
Right.
So if you're lacking in certain skills, like I always push the fight skills. You know, I push jiu-jitsu and other fight skills that you need to be confident with. You don't need to be a fucking expert. You don't need to be a black belt, but you need to be confident and somewhat skilled and understanding in basic fight skills. Not just this gun is going to save me in every which way I go.
Right.
Because it won't. It won't.
Right.
Because the gun is a tool.
Right, and you see it like you said, you know, and it's not about being a black belt. It's really just about getting a little weathered, you know, just kind of make sure that this isn't the first time you've been in this situation.
Yeah, go get punched in the face.
Right.
See what it's like.
And really, and it's funny because I talk to people and they're like, man, I would never want to do that. I would never want to go to a gym and get beat up. It's awesome. Right? I mean, you started rolling in Pinelands with those guys, right? And
I'll put a shout out to Pinelands and Professor Garrett Lavaggi, like incredible instructor. Absolute respect. And that organization with the individuals who go there, incredible.
It's a great group, and Garrett's widely respected. I've never been there to you know, roll with him or meet him but
you better have watched this that long.
I know of him through everybody's kind words about how fantastic he is. But anyway, the training that you received there, I mean, you could see it yourself. I mean, how many times do you walk into that gym and win? Probably rarely.
I don't want that's
win's
like,
the wrong word.
That's
but,
like a point like that you learn when you get into whatever martial art that you're not going into something to win.
Well, and you basically made my point for me. That's what I mean is you don't go in there, you're not going to win every roll. You're not going to tap every guy. You're not going to. So people will say, like, I don't want to go in there and get arm barred.
Right.
Well, nobody's in there to break anybody's arm.
Right.
It's not, you know, like I've been to boxing gyms. You know, nobody's in there trying to take each other's heads off. We're learning.
Yep.
You know, and it's good to go in there and learn in that scenario than to have taken your family to New York City to see the Christmas tree and now you're in the middle of an Antifa full-blown fucking riot and you don't know what to do.
Right.
You've never even been punched in the face.
Right. Exactly.
You know, it's scary, and to think that most of America walks around like that. You know, most police officers walk around like that.
But it's so easy. When things are that easy, we've had it so good for so long that we're all complacent.
Soft times make soft people.
Oh my God. And it has. It has. Who cry for more. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is literally and it's written down like this is the most prosperous time in history. Like
we're supposed to be dancing in the streets.
Yeah, like appreciative of everything that we have and can work to get, but yet people aren't. They want more. Give me more. And
Well, I'll give you, for instance, there's more people, and I'm one of them, upset right now that you can't get your hands on the new PlayStation 5 than upset with the amount of people, the amount of voter fraud in our election.
Is that the Christmas 2020 like run that people are like freaking out because they can't get a PS5?
I don't know. I don't understand what's going on. That might be the next riot. We're all going to riot and burn down Best Buy until we get a PlayStation 5.
And that'll happen too, because
probably
it's just crazy.
But it's hilarious to me that more people give a fuck about that than what happened to this election.
Yeah.
You know,
but we've been conditioned going back to all that. Like we're literally conditioned for that.
And it's so funny. It's so funny how the American people can just fly through things.
Yeah.
You know, like I said this on one of my previous shows that COVID will be gone as soon as the government comes up with something for you to be worried about. Mm-hmm. That's what they do. Yeah. Look, go back 10 months. If you said, what scares you? Active shooters. Go back 9 months. What scares you? COVID. Yeah. Go back 8 months. What scares you? Russian collusion. Yeah, it's like, it's whatever the government wants you to be a little afraid of at the moment. And I think that what's going to be really, really funny to see is the people that are brand new to politics. Donald Trump, if he did nothing else, brought a whole new era of people who understand politics, you know? And so now these people necessarily aren't necessarily good at their source selection, their this, that, and the other thing, right? So you're seeing all these people that were, Tucker Carlson's always right, Hannity's always right, and then all of a sudden they're watching Fox News on election night going, why are they hoping Biden wins? Right? They were all fucking confused. Well, you fucking sheeple didn't realize that this was all a big game. Yeah. That they've been lying to you from the start. They've both been lying to you. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CBC, whoever you want it to be, they've been lying to you, and they will always lie to you. Yeah. They're just you're the gullible guppy at the top of the tank. Yeah. You know what I mean?
The latest meme I saw was who sold out quicker in 2020, and it's either toilet paper or Fox News.
I'm just happy. I was just happy, that, I think everybody, and we could probably talk about this a little bit now. I mean, I know that there's some lawsuits that are still open, and a lot of Trump supporters are still hopeful. I'm one of them, but I'm also a realist, and I realize that it's probably over. I'm happy that it's been, I get that the Trump supporters had some Facebook posts and stuff that might upset people, but there's been no major violence. There was a huge rally in Washington, D.C. full of Trump supporters, and there was violence, but it was at night after the Trump supporters went home, and Antifa was a little upset about the amount of red, white, and blue. I'm happy. I'm happy that we're moving forward. I'm scared of where we're going, but I realize that, there's no sense in stressing about things that you can't control. Yeah. And
at least at the level we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think you just continue to have foresight, plan, and spend some time thinking. Yeah. People don't do that anymore. People don't, and I don't do it good enough either. I wish I was one of those guys that I could sit here and tell you I meditate and stuff. I don't. But I definitely think hard enough to have steam come out of my fucking ears sometimes. And I realize where we are. Yeah. I realize who's driving the boat right now.
Yeah. And then like other things to do, like realize, okay, we need social media, obviously, so people can watch this. But beyond that, try to cut the cord a little bit, like I'm doing myself, and go out into real life. Do some things with your family and your friends, and appreciate the life you have, because who knows where it's going to go. Yeah. So get out of that imaginary world, and live some life.
Yeah. And there's a good and a bad way to use anything, right? If you handed me a bottle of Tylenol because I had a headache, I could take a Tylenol and my headache could go away, or I could smash the bottle on my head and make my headache worse, right? Well, social media does, not social media, but all these platforms like Hulu, Netflix, all this stuff, right? They do provide some pretty awesome content. If you're looking for awesome content, if you want to wallow in a hole of depression and conspiracy theories, have at it.
Yeah.
I do that too. But there's some awesome shit, man. I just over the weekend for the first time watched the documentary. It's been out for a couple of years now. Free Solo. Have you ever seen that? I won't give too much of it away, but now that I've been there, this guy climbs El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. I was just there a couple months ago, and I never realized that was I don't understand the world of rock climbing. I'm not a rock climber. I'm a boat racer, right? So when I saw that come out, I'm like, oh, that's crazy. This guy climbs shit with no rope. But there's been people that string a tightrope between towers in New York City and walk across it. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy shit. Well, here's what changed. We went to Yosemite National Park. First of all, I can tell you right now, I have never seen anything this beautiful. We obviously drove through it. I was there with my mom and my aunt. My mom had a little bit of altitude sickness. Wasn't adjusting to it well. We were 12,000 feet up, which is really high. And, so we drove through most of it to be safe. We got to what they call Glacier Point, which looks at what would be depicted as Half Dome in the documentary. And what it is where a glacier had broke. And so now 12,000 feet in the air, which used to be covered in snow and water and had valleys and everything, it is now a mountain that is literally carved in half. Wow. And you can see it's all granite. That's cool. And it's huge, right? Yeah. This guy climbs that. And I'm like, wow, that's fucking unbelievable. When you see what he's climbing on, it's like me and you climbing on this table. There's nothing. His toe is touching like a crystal that's sticking out of the mountain that's this big. His toe's on it. He's got 2 fingers on this thing over here. And it's all about how hard you can push out, right? Like you're touching this little thing, your toes on a little thing, and you're pushing, creating pressure, which holds you in the same place. And that's how crazy. You scale this wall, right? Well, I saw that. We go down into the valley and we drive past El Capitan. And to be completely honest with you, I'm not some kind of nature guy. I would never even know what El Capitan was if it wasn't my operating system on my MacBook.
Me too.
So I'm driving past it and I got hit with this wave of like, I can't believe that exists. Here's this thing that looks like it's 1,000,000 miles tall and it's all sheer granite. I mean, it's just granite. Like, the things that the Egyptians cut out by hand and traveled 100 miles with, 10,000-pound stones, stacked them up.
Insanely hard rock.
Yeah, that stuff. So, no conspiracy theories exist, though. And so it cracked me up to see that, and then now to watch this documentary, and it's exactly what you were saying. Get outside, do things. I think we're losing this generation of people. This guy dedicated his life to what's called free soloing, climbing with no rope, and he scales El Capitan in under 4 hours. Wow. And it is the most nerve-wracking thing. I'll watch a race boat run in the ocean at 100 and whatever miles an hour, and I'll be like, that's cool. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm watching this guy. I'm watching this guy, and I know what the outcome's going to be, right? I know he's going to make it. Yeah. I'm watching him, and I'm like, don't, be careful. If one rock.
Because you didn't do that.
It's scary, man, but it's so cool to what I was saying about there's good and there's bad, right? Mm-hmm. There's content that when I watched it, I walked away from that like all positive, right? Right. Just a good amount of inspiration, a good amount of admiration. I think that's another thing that is gone now. Admiration. Like you're not allowed to admire anybody, right? I have heroes. I'm not ashamed to say it. I have people that I believe are light years better than me at what I do. People, you hear these people talk about, especially in the boat racing community, I'm the best there is. I'm the best there was. I won all these races. Or, I love Bob Teague. Much respect to Bob Teague, but like he claims to have won like 1,000 boat races or something, And it's like, to me, it's not about that. Like I don't care if I ever reach the pinnacle of Bob Teague, right? Or if I'm ever as a super cat, 20-year veteran like Billy Moff with all these wins. And I don't care to ever be that. I enjoy being a fan. I enjoy being inspired by it. I enjoy, Billy in 2000, I believe 17, ran against my brother in AMH. It was their first year, him and Aaron. And he ran my brother all over that race course. my brother was probably 10 mile an hour faster than him, but couldn't get around him. And where like you would, if I told you that story, you'd be like, you must hate that guy. I don't. I watched it in awe, in awe of the ability that guy has behind the wheel of a Supercat. I don't know. I've never seen him run a V-bottom or run a. I don't know, but I know what he can do in that boat is jaw-droppingly impressive. Why can't we do that anymore?
Yeah, that's like my driver and partner Joey. When I raced him in a Garvey, one race in particular I'll never forget in my life, and I was literally right behind him the entire time, and I could not get around him, and he just drove that thing perfectly. Like there was no chance I was ever going to get around him, but I was just right there, and every time I might have had an opening, he would close it on me, and he knew exactly what he was doing, and that's what makes him amazing. And just literally one of the best Garvey drivers ever. Like he's that good. So, and that's admiration there. Like,
right.
You know, you want to improve yourself, but there's, and that I explained the last time during the SWAT competitions, there's this level that people develop jealousy and resentment and this, and it's like, yo, you don't have to be that way. You know, you should be wanting to improve yourself to that level and not go negative.
Right.
But these things it's there, and it's really regrettable. It's something that shouldn't be affecting our society. And
I think that people would really benefit from that, you know, taking a back seat.
Yeah.
That's being humble.
It's humbling.
That's, you know,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
You know, and I think that we've lost our ability to do that.
Yeah.
I think that social media is something that it did that I attribute a lot of today's issues to social media. I think there's not a coincidence that at its inception, so was the inception of all of our issues. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah.
I think that the competition that it drove was the wrong kind of competition. It drove this look at me crowd, right? Look how many likes I got. Look how many followers I got. I do it. Look at I post a podcast and I go, oh, I only got like 300. You know, I do it all the time, and I think it's really bad. I try my hardest to like make sure that even though you're never gonna. That's the other thing that I'm sorry to jump off of one to the other, but there's something there that people need to learn how to do. And it's not the total deletion of your bad habits, right? Like if you have a bad habit, you want to work on getting rid of that habit, but that doesn't mean that every time you fall back into that habit, it's some major failure and you're a failure. And all you have to do to correct bad behavior, bad habit, bad processes, everybody has them, right? Is just be conscious of them, right? And try your best to slow them down. And I think that that's where we're at right now. We're in this powder keg. It's like a echo chamber with some cancel culture, with some crazy corruption, all in this powder keg that's ready to just, you know, and I don't know what the best course of action is. I know that as people, we need to work on being better people.
Individuals. And that's the only way it's going to get better. But we've been manipulated in such a way that individuals are now taken out of the equation. So it's going to be near impossible to fix. On a lighter note, talking about platforms like Netflix, the last movie I just watched was Wheels of Fortune. And I know this is like totally random, but one of my Facebook friends put one of those things, you know, you put something out there, you're like, well, name a TV series I can watch or movie. So in the comments, one dude says, watch Wheels of Fortune, our crew's in it. So I'm like, all right, I'll watch it. It was a boat racer. So I eventually saw who it was, which really cracked me up. But Wheels of Fortune, this race crowd who watches this video, this podcast, it is freaking hilarious. It's absolutely stupid, but it's well worth the watch, and it's fucking hilarious.
I'll check some of that out. I haven't seen that myself.
It's hilarious.
I'll check it out. It is funny because I was I was on we think, I guess, I don't know if it's just our notion, but like I like to think that like boat racing isn't that widely known or respected, or so just like for the fuck of it, the other day I was looking for like Christmas gifts and stuff, and I'm on Amazon and I type in like offshore racing in the search bar, and sure as shit, I mean, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but like there's like silly shit on there. Like I got a hat that says a black belt in boat racing, like there's like, it's out there, it's around, it's cool to see, like, that shit like that is going on, man. It's really neat, and it brings me back to like those Miami Vice days, like it just, the silliness, the funny shit that went on, back when they were filming that around the races and all. I was there for that. I mean, I remember standing in front of Jamie Collins and Colin Farrell, or Jamie Foxx and Colin Farrell.
If you got a black belt in boat racing, you got to be the poorest motherfucker in the world.
That's it, dude. I think I should give that hat to Rob Lauer.
He deserves it.
He's got a black belt in boat racing, if anybody's got one. That's grassroots.
He deserves it more than anyone.
Dude, and congrats to him, man. They ran their ass off in Moorhead. I haven't actually done a show since the Worlds, and congratulations to all of our champions and participants, man.
Absolutely.
And congratulations to the best goddamn pace boat on the planet.
Oh,
that's Steven Adams. You're the first guy that has ever come to pace a race with his pace boat where after the race I've had people taking up collections to keep you there. You're like, man, we'll pay for Steve the trailer to boat to the next race.
That was actually the one race that we all had the most fun at ever. Like, it was like the best race ever.
We had a blast. Yeah. You know what I think it is people got back to one thing that's coming of all these lockdowns and wear your mask everywhere and do this and do that, is we realized how much we took for granted. And it was really evident in that Moorhead City race, the second one there. The first one, everybody was kind of like on eggshells. Yeah. Right? That's how I felt. That's how I feel like interacting with people. That's how they felt as well. Yeah. Like that at any moment we could do something that would put something in jeopardy, or everybody was very careful, which is great, and everybody was still careful and safe on the second one, but everybody kind of put their guard down for a second, and we got back to just being
normal,
being people. And what a great time, man. What a blast. Yeah. And there was so much good that came of that. Shout out to Matt Soper, won a world championship this year, first year out. Yeah. It's really been a good run considering. Yep. We did good, pulling 3 races together. I mean, 2 in Moorhead and then the 1 invitational in Lake of the Ozarks. And we're
shout out to Team Ladies Choice leader Lindsay.
Oh,
of course. And then also Jim, who, without him flagging, we wouldn't have gotten as many compliments as we did. So that was a great roundabout team. And then having the opportunity on Saturday, where there were no races, to like literally do idle laps around the island with like Scotty B and Smitty got on there, and Anthony, and we were literally just like driving around. It was like the best day ever. So, we had it was an amazing time in Moorhead City with the best crowd ever and being normal.
Yeah, and thanks to Jeff and DJ, and the whole staff for making that happen, because they produced the environment. Mm-hmm. They really did. I mean, we go and I hate when I say this, I do this a lot, because when I say we go or we do this or we do that, it's because I'm at every single event. Yeah. I mean, when I say we, I mean me. When I go to certain places, you run into forms of the Gestapo. Mm-hmm. You can do this, you can't do that. You get yelled at, you get this, you get that. And that's my nature. I get in trouble all the time. Mm-hmm. But like we got down to Moorhead, and like I'd see DJ like trying to tell somebody like, hey man, you can't barbecue right here in the street. Like we got restaurants that paid money to be a part of this, and but it goes back to that adage of like there's 2 ways of saying something. Yeah. And talk about people that really understand how to say things the right way. Yeah. Those people down there in North Carolina, all of them. Mm-hmm. The fans, the community, Jeff, DJ, the whole staff, they all are such polite, awesome, stand-up people. Mm-hmm. I mean, it afforded us to have that best day ever.
Absolutely.
And so thank you guys. Thank you, Moorhead City. It was an unbelievable event, and we will 100% be back. Yeah. No doubt.
Made 2020 normal for a good time.
That's it. I think I'm going to put that on a T-shirt. Morehead City made 2020 normal again.
Huge.
Huge. It was a huge event.
Huge.
We just got to move that spectator fleet back a little bit. But no, buddy, it was a good time. Thank you for your help down there. And you got anything else you want to fire off?
Good for now. I think. How long have we been talking?
A long fucking time.
Awesome. Awesome. So, like, if anybody actually sits through this whole thing and put in the comments, if you have comments, like,
yeah.
if you want a part 3, and if there's any details that we didn't cover or we may be able to cover in the future, then
yeah, let us know.
Throw it down there, and maybe we'll hit on some things, because we tend to, like, we sit down and we're all over the place, which is a lot of fun for us. And
it's fun for people too, man.
We're back to solving the world's problems.
There's a reason why I refuse to change my show. From I've had a lot of people, and I'm sorry for anybody that this upsets, but a lot of people tell me, you would do way better doing 20-minute shows or 40-minute shows. I might, but to me, there's no substance to it. Yeah. Like how you say people might not enjoy us jumping around a lot. Yeah. That's just how people talk.
Yeah.
And people are just now stumbling on.
And it's your show.
Well, and that, and people are just kind of now stumbling on how much they long for, dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think it's good. I think everything that we talk about comes from a good place, whether we're right or wrong, or whether you agree with us or not. I meant it in the best way possible, and people enjoy it, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's a good time. But
I could dig it.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for coming in. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me, and always willing to return.
Yeah, well, you'll be back. Thank you, Steve Adams. Thank you, Bow Shield. T9 brought you this podcast. I appreciate it, guys. Hopefully do some business with you here in the future.
Labels out.
Have a good one.